Hey guys, it's me, Amaterasu, back with another part 2, Naruto vs Sasuke the Aftermath, but without further ado, roll the intro.
Hey Ross, sauce it up.
And I got all my feels. I'm getting this paper, I'm stacking a meal. I'm with your hoe in the house on the hills. Yeah. I'ma keep it real, at the sacrifice and try to get my bands up. Shorty wanna fuck with me, she see me on the camera. She said she in love with me, but really I can't stand
Chapter 14, Friendships. As the early morning dawn broke through the window in Ino's bedroom, it shone on the smiling face of one Hinata Hyuga as she slowly began to awaken. Sitting up, she rubbed her eyes and looked across the bedroom at Ino, who groaned and buried her head under a pillow to block out the morning rays. Hinata giggled at this as she began to rise and get dressed for the day's activities. In her whole life, Hinata could not remember feeling as happy and content as she did at that moment. Memories of her date the night before with Naruto were still fresh in her mind, as she looked over towards the picture of the two of them they had gotten last night at the restaurant. Smiling, she picked up the photo and kissed the image of Naruto, before heading downstairs to make breakfast for the Yamanaka clan to thank them for allowing her to stay the night. Hinata's mood was also upbeat due to the fact that she was moving in with her new guardian and sensei Yuhi Kurenai today. Hinata began to hum to herself as she prepared breakfast for Ino and her family, and for the first time in a long time, she actually looked forward to what the day would bring her. Meanwhile, back at Hokage Tower, the mood of one Hokage Tsunade was not as positive as Hinata's currently was. As Tsunade began to stir, her reaction to the morning sun hitting her face was much like Ino's, as she groaned and wearily lifted her head from her desk. Still groggy, Tsunade accidentally knocked over an empty sake bottle on her desk, which shattered upon hitting the floor. This action prompted Shizune to come rushing into the office to check on the Hokage. The sight she beheld was nothing new to Shizune, as she watched her friend and mentor struggle to get her bearings. However, Shizune did notice that Tsunade's eyes were very red and puffy, indicating this had not been a normal drinking binge on her part, as she could tell that her friend had spent a great deal of the night crying. Shizune knew that Tsunade was upset about the Sakura situation, but she suspected that her mentor's sorrow stemmed more from the incident with Jiraiya the night before rather than the missing kunoichi. Over the past several weeks, Shizune had noticed that whenever the subject of Jiraiya was brought up to the Hokage, her mood and demeanor would be affected greatly. As Shizune knelt down to clean up the broken shards of the sake bottle, she heard Tsunade ask in a dry voice, "Any word on Sakura from the search teams yet?" "I'm sorry Lady Tsunade, but no. A few of the teams have returned already, but they found no signs of the girl. But the majority of the teams are still out searching, so there is still hope that we'll have some good news before the day is through. Shizune answered, trying to sound as upbeat and positive as she could. "I hope you're right, Shizune, and that it will be good news, but I doubt it. When it comes to that bastard ex-teammate of mine Orochimaru and those around him, the outcome is rarely good news. Tsunade laments to her friend. In another part of Konoha, Naruto slowly began to stir as he opened his eyes to view his new surroundings. He had been surprised at the sparse living conditions of Kakashi's apartment when he first saw it the day before, but he quickly surmised that the life of a ninja was fleeting at best and did not require a great deal of personal luxuries that most people did. In fact, Kakashi's lone personal luxury was an entire wall with shelves containing every single volume of the Icha Icha Paradise series to date. Even more amazing was the fact that he owned not one but two of every volume, as one of every book was still sealed in its original wrapping, while the other had been opened and read at some point. Kakashi obviously took great pride in his collection, as he had several potentially deadly traps and jutsu barriers surrounding it. As Naruto gazed upon some of the covers adorned with images of very beautiful and sexy women, his mind drifted back to Hinata and how beautiful and sexy she had looked the night before. After a moment, his eyes suddenly snapped open as a growing feeling began to emerge in his lower body, and he shot out of bed and ran to the bathroom frantically saying, bad thoughts, cold shower, cold shower." Kakashi's neighbors were awakened seconds later by a shrill scream followed by a heavy sigh, as Naruto began to bathe and get ready for the new day. Meanwhile, Hinata had just finished preparing breakfast for the Yamanakas when Ino's parents walked through the door looking very tired. They were pleasantly surprised to see a hot meal waiting for them, as they both were starved. Hinata immediately bowed to them and said, "Inoiki-sama, Keiko-sama, I did not realize that both of you had been out. I hope you don't mind, but I made breakfast for you all." Inoiki and Keiko looked at the very appetizing spread before them and smiled before Keiko replied. We don't mind at all, this is a wonderful surprise. Thank you very much, Hinata. There is no need to thank me, Keiko-sama, Inoiki-sama. I wanted to thank you both for allowing me into your home to spend the night. I am most grateful. Hinata politely said. Just then Ino came stumbling downstairs and grumbled some sort of greeting to everyone as she sat down at the table and immediately began eating. After her first bite, Ino's droopy eyes suddenly shot wide open and she exclaimed. Mom, what happened? This food is awesome. Dad, did you have any of this yet? Inoiki immediately sat down and began loading his plate with food. After he took a bite, he too remarked as Hinata and Keiko took their seats. You're right, Ino, this is the best meal we've had in years in this house. It's delicious. It's more than delicious, it's amazing. I can't believe Mom made this. Ino replied without looking up, as she and her father seemed to race to see who could eat the most. I didn't make it, Keiko said with an edge to her voice as she let loose a tiny bit of killing intent towards her husband and daughter. Both Ino and Inoiki froze as they realized they were in trouble before Ino finally asked. If you didn't make it, Mom, who did? Well, this is the best meal we've had in years in this house, was prepared by your friend Hinata-chan, Keiko said as she shot a glare at her husband before adding. It was very sweet of her to do this, something if I recall correctly you've never attempted to do, Ino. Keiko then shot Ino a glare as well, while Hinata sat quietly to the side feeling slightly uncomfortable with a mild blush on her face. Well, I love you and Dad so much, that I would never subject you to my terrible cooking. Ino responded with a sheepish grin on her face before she added. Besides, we shouldn't be surprised that Hinata knows how to cook this well. She was probably trained by some of the great chefs they have over there at the Hyuga compound. Ino then looked to Hinata with pleading eyes as if silently saying to her to please back me up on this. Hinata choked on her food when Ino said this, as she knew it wasn't true. Hinata had self-taught herself over the years how to cook and had received very little help from the chefs her family had. She looked at Ino and saw the desperation in her friend's eyes before stammering. Yes, it's true. I have received training from some of the skilled chefs we have at my family's household. I'm sure Ino would be just as good a cook as I if she had received some lessons from a great cook as well. Both Inoiki and Keiko smile upon hearing this, as both of them know Hinata is lying through her teeth. But she is doing it to help and protect Ino. They realize what a good friend Hinata could be to their daughter and hope Ino discovers it as well. Inoiki then laughs and absently says. It's a good thought, Hinata. The only problem is we don't know any good cooks who could train Ino? Inoiki immediately wished he pulled those words back, as he was hit with a substantial amount of killing intent from his wife as she leveled in deadly glare towards him. Ino saw this as an opportunity to escape and grabbed Hinata's hand and pulled her up towards the stairs to her room while saying, well, we would love to stay and talk some more, but Hinata and I have to get ready. I'm helping Hinata move today into her new apartment with Lady Kurenai. We'll see you all later. As both girls run upstairs, Inoiki realizes he is now all alone with Keiko and looks over to see she is advancing towards him with an empty frying pan in her hand. Inoiki quickly begins to stammer out an apology before the entire household is greeted with the loud clanging sound of a frying pan meeting ahead. As Keiko left her husband face first in his plate of food unconscious, she sat back down and thought to herself, how dare he say we don't know any good cooks who could train Ino? I'm a good cook, even if my husband and daughter don't recognize or appreciate it yet. Keiko then took another bite of the food Hinata prepared and quietly said after swallowing. I'm good, but not as good as this. When Ino and Hinata got to Ino's room, she quickly shut the door and leaned against it, breathing a sigh of relief before saying, that was close. I forgot what a maniac my mother is about cooking. She thinks she's great at it, but the truth of the matter is it's a wonder my father and I haven't starved to death over the years trying to live on her meals. Ha, ha, ha. Ino looked over to Hinata, who also giggled at her statement before asking. Hinata, did you receive cooking lessons from your family's chefs? Hinata began twiddling her fingers nervously and looked to the floor before shaking her head no in response and said. No, Ino, I taught myself how to cook in secret. My father felt it was beneath a Hyuga from the main branch to cook for themselves and forbid anyone from learning how. Ino was shocked when she heard this. She had assumed what she had said to her parents was the truth. Now after hearing from Hinata that it wasn't, Ino realized the Hyuga princess had just lied to her folks to protect her. She tried to think if any of her other friends would have done that for her. Sakura certainly wouldn't have. She would have just left Ino twisting in the wind and then laughed about it later on. Looking at Hinata, Ino recognized that was a big thing for the girl to do just to cover for her. Ino suddenly felt very bad for putting Hinata into that position, unintentional as it was. She knew that Hinata was uncomfortable telling a lie, even if it was just a little white lie. Ino sat down on the bed next to Hinata and said, I'm sorry for doing that to you, Hinata. I didn't mean to put you into a position to have to lie to my parents just to cover my butt from getting into trouble because of my big mouth. It's alright, Ino, isn't that what friends are supposed to do, protect one another? You are my friend, aren't you, Ino? Hinata hesitantly asks. Well, of course I'm your friend, Hinata. You're acting like you don't know what it's like to be friends with someone? Ino questions. Hinata looked to the floor again and after a moment quietly said. I don't know, Ino. You're the first friend I've had in my life. Ino was stunned upon hearing this from Hinata. Why would she say something like that? Hinata had lots of friends. Ino thought the Hyuga girl must be joking with her and laughing she said. Ha, quit kidding around, Hinata. You've got lots of friends and you know it. Hinata's face saddened at Ino's words and her eyes began to tear slightly as she softly said. No, Ino, I don't. Ino saw the sad expression on Hinata's face and put her arm around Hinata's shoulder to comfort her and said. Of course you have friends, Hinata. Besides me, there's Naruto and your teammates Shino and Kiba. Plus I'm sure you've got lots of friends back at the Hyuga compound. Why would you think you don't have any friends? Hinata, still looking to the ground, sighed heavily as she listened to Ino before woefully saying. It's not true, Ino. Naruto is my boyfriend and that's different from a friend. And we weren't friends before we started seeing one another, just comrades I guess. Shino and Kiba I love dearly, but they are more like older brothers to me than friends. Back at the compound, the only kids around my age were in the side branch of the family. My father forbade me from associating with them. Even when I secretly defied my father and tried to play with them and be their friend, they shunned me because I was the heir of the main branch. They were told to stay away from me by their parents for fear of bringing my father's wrath down upon them. I know it may seem hard to believe, but you are the first friend I've ever had. Ino's heart nearly broke as she listened to Hinata. She had no idea how oppressive a life Hinata had under her father's rule. She looked at the Hyuga heir and then hugged her much to Hinata's surprise and said. I'm sorry, Hinata, I had no idea, but I'll tell you, since I'm your first friend, that makes me your best friend, and you're mine. Hinata was astonished beyond words as Ino said this and released her hug. Hinata stared at the girl wide-eyed before stammering. But, Ino, you already have a best friend in Sakura. Why would you say that I'm your best friend? Ha, forehead girl. Yeah, I guess she was my best friend when we were little, but we haven't been that close the past few years. We pretty much drifted apart after the whole Sasuke competition between us. I'm not really sure we're even friends anymore, let alone best friends. Besides, it's my choice who I want as a best friend and you're it. Unless you don't want to be my best friend, Hinata? Ino playfully says to the Hyuga princess with a pout on her lips and puppy dog eyes blinking. Hinata saw the look Ino was giving her and giggled at her expression before saying. I would be honored to be your best friend, Ino, thank you. No, Hinata, thank you, the honor is all mine. Ino replied as the two girls hugged once more before they stood up and Ino remarked. Now let's hurry up, we can't sit around here all day. We've got to get you moved today, remember? Hi, Hinata answered, as the two of them began to get ready for the new day. Meanwhile, Neji and Tenten arrived at the hospital to visit their friend and teammate Rock Lee, who was still crippled from his match with Gaara at the Chunin exams. As they entered his room, Lee was sitting in a darkened corner staring out the window onto the village. Tenten noticed the depressed look on her teammate's normally exuberant face and cringed slightly. Both she and Neji had started to worry about Lee the past few weeks as his positive attitude towards life seemed to lessen a little more each day. Masking her concern, Tenten bounded over to Lee and kissed him on his cheek before saying. Hey Lee-kun, what are you doing sitting here in the corner all by yourself? Why don't you join Neji and I for breakfast and then you help us train afterwards? Lee just stared blankly out the window before saying in a monotone voice. Help, you mean watch you and Neji train, don't you? Tenten winced at Lee's reply and the room seemed to grow deathly quiet, before Neji's voice broke through the silence and said. No Lee, you can help us. You know my own and Tenten's taijutsu is very bad. We were planning on training on that today and you can point out what we're doing wrong. Lee turned his head to look at his two teammates and friends before grinning slightly and said. You're a terrible liar, Neji Hyuga, but I thank you for the effort. Yours and Tenten's taijutsu is far from bad and you know it. In fact, of our classmates the only people who might be on par with either one in taijutsu are Naruto and perhaps Hinata. We are the students of Mido Gai, the greatest taijutsu master our village has ever seen. There is no way he would ever allow any of his pupils to not be properly trained in that fighting style. You forgot one person who is also an expert in taijutsu, you. Isn't it your dream to be a splendid shinobi in taijutsu alone? Surely your flames of youth will help you to achieve that. Tenten cheerfully remarks, trying to lift her teammates' spirits. Lee's grin disappeared after hearing this and he looked to the ground before lamenting. Yes, that was my dream, but that is all in the past, Tenten-chan. Now, all I am is a shinobi warrior trapped in a broken body, and even my flames of youth aren't going to change that fact. Which is why this difficult for me to say, but it must be said. I appreciate your visits, but the two of you should forget about me and move on. It does neither one of you any good to be burdened by a useless wreck such as I anymore. I'm just holding you both back. The two of you should request a new teammate and continue on to become the splendid shinobis I always knew you would be. Tenten's eyes began to well with tears hearing Lee say this, and even Neji noticeably stiffened as he heard his teammate and friend speak, before he regained his composure and replied with a grin. Stop talking such foolishness, Lee. We don't want nor need a new teammate. You know as well as everyone that Lady Tsunade will discover a treatment to heal you and you'll be back with the team in no time. Besides, it would be impossible to find another teammate who could annoy me as much as you do. Lee uttered a soft chuckle after hearing this before it faded away and he quietly said, I appreciate yours and Tenten's optimism, but even if what you say might happen, it could be years before it does. I cannot allow my situation to impede the two of you in your development as shinobi. You must get another teammate and move on. Well, Lee-kun, that just isn't going to happen. So I guess you're just going to have to get better soon, so you won't hold us back anymore. Tenten sternly says. Lee doesn't reply as he just stares at the floor, and another uneasy silence envelopes the room. After a moment he says, the two of you should go. I'm interrupting your training. You're not interrupting anything, Lee. We were just going to train for a little bit and then go out and try to find Neji a place to live. And quote. Tenten answers. I can help you with that if you want, Neji? Lee calmly replied, as he grabbed his crutch and struggled slightly getting up from his chair. He then limped over to the side table by his bed before grabbing a set of keys and then tossing them to Neji before saying, I may not be able to be a teammate anymore, but I can still be a friend. Take my apartment, Neji. I obviously don't need it anymore. Guy-sensei has kept the rent up on it in the hope that I would be returning to it. But I know the only way I'm ever going to leave this hospital if a treatment isn't found is feet first. Tenten gasped when she heard this, prompting Lee to say to the distraught girl, It's just a metaphor, Tenten-chan. Don't read anything into it. Neji is stunned at the generosity of his friend. He wonders silently to himself if the situation had been reversed, would he have been as generous or as good a friend to Lee as he is to him. After a moment, he says, I don't know what to say, but thank you, Lee. I'll accept your offer, but only under the condition that when you are better, it is yours again when you return. With a slight smirk on his face as if he knew that was not going to happen, Lee replied, I accept your condition, Neji. By the way, I'm very sorry to hear about what happened to your brethren in the Hyuga side branch yesterday. What are you talking about, Lee? Neji quickly asked. I apologize, Neji, I thought you knew. Several members of the Hyuga side branch were arrested yesterday and are currently being held by the Anbu. I overheard a doctor and a nurse talking about it, as they were treating one of the Hyugas for injuries he suffered during his questioning by Ibiki and the interrogation squad. Lee replied. Arrested? Arrested for what? Neji asks in anger. Lee looked down to the ground before he quietly said, I'm sorry, Neji, I heard they were arrested for attempting to kill Naruto by burning his home to the ground. Neji's eyes grew wide in shock and his breath seemed to catch in his throat before he stammered. I'm sorry, Lee, I have to go. I must speak to the Hokage immediately. Tenten, stay with Lee, I'll talk to you later. Before either Lee or Tenten could reply, Neji had already bolted through the door and was speeding towards Hokage Tower. As Neji raced to see Lady Tsunade, Hinata and Ino bounded down the stairs at the Yamanaka home and were greeted with the sight of Keiko holding an ice pack to the back of Inoiki's head, as he sat at the table groaning. Ino tried to stifle her amusement upon seeing this before she noticed her parents' clothing and asked, Mom, Dad, how come you guys are dressed in full field gear right now? Are you two going on a mission? No, dear, we're returning from a mission to try and find your, Keiko. Ino's mother began to say before Inoiki sternly interrupted her by yelling her name before adding, I'm sorry, Ino, we are not allowed to discuss the mission. It is a Class A security mission that is still ongoing. Ino was about to press the issue further in response, before Hinata spoke up and bowing her head said, Hi Inoiki-sama, we understand. Yeah, okay I guess. Well, we have to go. I'll be back in time for dinner. Ino remarked. Ino, Hinata, you may want to check and see if Lady Kurenai is available. She too was involved with this mission and may not be back as of yet. Inoiki states. Thank you for letting us know, Inoiki-sama. We will stop by her home to check before we head over to my family's compound. Hinata politely replied, as the two girls headed out the door. As the Yamanakas watched their daughter and Hinata leave, Keiko said to her husband, Inoiki, shouldn't we have told them about their friend Sakura? No, Keiko, it's still a Class A mission. I'm sure they'll hear about it soon enough. Besides, I don't think Ino really considers Sakura a friend anymore. We've hardly ever seen the two of them together the past few years. As for Hinata, A rumor I heard about an incident at the Hokage's office several weeks ago between her and Sakura leads me to believe they are most definitely not friends. Inoki replies with a chuckle. I suppose you're right, dear. Still, even though Ino and Sakura are no longer friends, I still hope we find Sakura soon and that she'll be alright? Keiko says with concern. I hope so as well, Keiko, but unfortunately whatever happens to the girl, she brought it upon herself. This may sound selfish, but I'm actually grateful that Ino and Sakura are no longer friends. I don't want my daughter dragged down into her mess in any way. Inoki coldly states, before Keiko says. It's not selfish, dear, you're just being a concerned father who looks out for his daughter. Thank you, Keiko. Inoki replied as they shut the door behind them and walked back to the dining room. Back at Hokage Tower, Neji arrived at Lady Tsunade's office and saw an Anbu shinobi from the interrogation squad guarding her doorway. As Neji approached, the guard said with a sneer. What do you want, Hyuga? I've come to speak to the Hokage about an incident that involved some of my clansmen yesterday. It is most urgent that I speak to her at once. Neji answered. The Hokage has no time for the likes of you, and is already currently discussing that matter with Ibiki-san. Be gone, Hyuga child, and let the adults handle things. The Anbu growls to Neji. As Lady Tsunade and Ibiki are talking, her office door is suddenly torn off its hinges as the Anbu guard comes crashing through it. Neji, stepping through the debris in the doorway with his Byakugan blazing, follows him, as he says with venom. Be mindful to whom you speak, you worm. Never insult the Hyuga name or me ever again. For if you do, I promise you will live to regret it. What the hell is going on? Tsunade yells as the Anbu guard quickly rises to his feet and says. Forgive this intrusion, Hokage-sama. This Jinan wished to speak to you, and when I refused he attacked me. Please allow me to remove this Hyuga scum from your presence. This was the wrong thing to say as Neji suddenly appeared in front of the Anbu guard and delivered a series of palm strikes to the man's chest, causing him to drop to his knees and cough blood profusely. As Neji stood over the guard, he growled. I told you, Anbu pig, never to insult me or my family's name in my presence. Maybe now you'll realize the mistake you have made in ignoring my warning and making me angry. I'll warn you, Neji Hyuga, that it is a grave mistake on your part to piss me off, which you're starting to do if you don't explain yourself right now. Tsunade shouts at the Hyuga prodigy with authority. I apologize, Hokage Tsunade, it was not my intention to cause an incident at your office when I came here, but it is urgent that I speak to you in regards to find out what happened yesterday with some of my clan. Neji contritely says while bowing. Well, since you're not the first Hyuga to cause an incident in this office, I'll accept your apology. Tsunade replies, remembering Hinata's thrashing of Sakura several weeks ago, before adding. I had planned on sending for you today anyway, Neji. Take a seat and I'll discuss what happened with you in a moment. Ibiki, take your man to the hospital for treatment, and I must say I'm a little shocked that he was so easily defeated by a mere Jinan. Yes, Hokage-sama, he is young and only recently promoted to the Anbu. It is obvious his overconfidence in his own ability and in underestimating his opponents led to this embarrassing defeat. I can assure you he will never have a lapse in judgment like this again. Ibiki states with disgust in his voice as he helps the guard out the doorway and to the hospital. Now Neji, I want some answers as to why 5 members of the Hyuga side branch would attempt to kill my Naruto-kun by setting fire to his home, and I want those answers now. Tsunade asks, the anger very evident in her voice. I have no idea why this has happened, Hokage-sama. I only learned of this incident a little while ago. I was hoping you could tell me why this happened? Neji says. I wish I knew, Neji, but all we have ascertained even with Ibiki's influence is that they admit to setting the fire but refuse to say anything else. I know they're hiding their motives as to why they did this, but unless they tell us their reasons behind this crime, I'll have no choice but to order their execution for the attempted murder of a Leaf Village shinobi. Tsunade stoically replies. Please, Lady Tsunade, before you pass that sentence, let me talk to them. I will learn the truth as to why they did this. I have no proof, but I'm positive that Hiashi Hyuga is behind this terrible crime. I can assure you that the Hyuga side branch holds no animosity towards Naruto to perpetuate such a cowardly act. I humbly ask that you allow me to speak to them and resolve this mystery. Neji pleads as he bows his head. Very well, Neji. I suspect you are correct about Hyashi's involvement, but unless your clansmen are willing to testify to that, suspicions are meaningless. I shall accompany you to the Anbu jail and you will be allowed to speak to them. But I warn you, if they still refuse to explain themselves, I will pass judgment and they will be executed immediately for their crimes. Is that understood? Tsunade says. Hi Hokage-sama, I understand. I swear upon the Hyuga name, we will learn the truth behind these crimes. Thank you for allowing me the chance to do this. Neji politely states. You are most welcome, Neji. Now please wait downstairs. I have some work I need to finish first before we head over to the prison. Tsunade orders the young Jinan, who nods in acceptance and quietly leaves the room. As Kurenai returned to her apartment, she felt exhausted. The search for Sakura had encompassed many miles for herself and her team. So much so that she ordered both Kiba and Shino to go home and get a few hours of rest, as they may be needed to resume the mission later on. When she opened the door to her home, she was greeted to the sight of Hinata and Ino asleep in her living room. She then noticed that the entire apartment had been cleaned from top to bottom and seemed to sparkle in the sunlight. Kurenai then looked back to the two girls and smiled. She realized they must have spent a great deal of time this morning cleaning the new apartment, which she was most grateful for, as she did not have the strength or desire to do after spending all night on the mission. Kurenai decided she would let them sleep and began to silently move to her bedroom to get some as well, when Hinata was suddenly awakened by a loud crash from the street below. This was followed by several people shouting, which seemed to echo in the apartment through the open door of the balcony. Hinata quickly scanned her surroundings and saw Kurenai standing in the living room smiling. Hinata immediately jumped up and nudged Ino, who was still asleep in an adjacent chair, and nervously said, Greetings Kurenai-sensei. Please forgive our intrusion into your home. I thought you might have forgotten that we had planned on getting my things from my father this morning to move in. Hinata, there is nothing to forgive, this is your home too. I'm the one who should be apologizing. I should have sent word to you that I was ordered on an emergency mission last night and that we should postpone getting your things until this afternoon. Kurenai replied. Yeah, my father mentioned something about that mission to us earlier. Can you tell us what's going on, Lady Kurenai? Ino groggily asks as she begins to awaken. I'm sorry, Ino, I cannot. It's a Class A security mission which is still in progress, and I'm not allowed to talk about it. Kurenai answers to the young Kunoichi. Yeah, that's the answer my father gave us as well. It must be pretty important to have so many high-ranking shinobi involved. Ino quips. As much as Kurenai wants to tell Hinata and Ino about what has happened, she knows they will learn of it soon enough and decides to try and change the subject by saying, The apartment looks wonderful, you two. Thank you for cleaning it. You can thank Ms. Good Housekeeping over there for that idea. She decided that since we needed to wait for you, we could get something accomplished until you arrived. She seems to have a lot of pent-up energy from the night before, if you know what I mean? Ino says with a giggle as Hinata blushes and glares furiously at her. Well ladies, I've been up all night and need to get a few hours of sleep. Hinata, if you don't mind, let's get your things this afternoon. Can you two keep yourselves occupied until then? Kurenai asks while yawning. You don't need to help in the move, Kurenai-sensei. Ino and I can handle the moving since you're returning from a mission. You should get some rest, Hinata politely says. Kurenai thought about this for a moment before quickly deciding that she did not want the girls there at the Hyuga compound alone with Hyashi Hyuga without sufficient support. From what Lady Tsunade had told her yesterday about Hyashi, there is no telling what he might do to Hinata and Ino if they were by themselves. Kurenai looked directly at Hinata and sternly said, I appreciate that, Hinata, but no. I don't want you anywhere near your father unless I am present, do you understand? Hi, Kurenai-sensei. Hinata softly answered. But, we are going to need some help this afternoon. Why don't the two of you see if you can rustle up some of your male counterparts to do just that. Kurenai remarks. That's a great idea, Hinata. Why don't you round up Kiba and Shino, and I'll go get Shikamaru and Kuji and we'll knock that move out in no time this afternoon. Ino exclaims. Not Kiba and Shino, they were on the same mission as I was last night and need some rest as well. Kurenai states. I'm okay, well how about Naruto? I'm sure he would be more than willing to help us. Ino says. No. Hinata says with force, shocking both Ino and Kurenai before softly adding. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to yell. I just don't want my father anywhere near Naruto. I'm afraid of what he might try to do to him. I don't want Naruto-kun hurt in any way because of me. Both Ino and Kurenai saw the concerned expression on Hinata's face before Ino threw her arm around Hinata's shoulder and laughingly said. That's okay, Hinata. Naruto's probably still trying to recover from the sight of you in that dress last night. Ha, ha, ha. Hinata began to blush even worse than before as she said. I need to return that dress to you, Ino. That's okay, Hinata, you keep it. Besides, the front of the dress is all stretched out now anyway. Ino replied while snickering. Ino, Hinata exclaimed, her face turning redder and redder by the second. I'm just teasing you, Hinata. You look way hotter in that dress than I ever did. Plus you told me Naruto only complimented you on it about 100 times last night. I wouldn't want to deprive him of seeing you in it again in the future. Ino says with a grin on her face. Thank you, Ino. Hinata replied with a smile on her face as memories of the night before resurfaced. Well then, let's get out of here so Lady Kurenai can get some rest. You can help me track down my teammates and Shanghai them for the move this afternoon. Ino stated as she pulled Hinata towards the door. Kurenai inwardly laughed at watching the two young girls interact with one another. It reminded Kurenai of her younger days with Anko when the snake mistress used to poke fun at her. Kurenai remembered that Anko had been instrumental in helping her overcome her shyness when they were that age. She hoped that Ino's friendship with the Hyuga heir might do the same thing for Hinata and help her to become more open with people. However, she also hoped for Hinata's sake that their friendship wouldn't end like Kurenai's and Anko's had. Shaking her head to drive away that unpleasant memory, she turned and headed towards her bedroom to try and get the sleep she desperately needed at that moment. A little while later, as Lady Tsunade and Neji approached Onbu headquarters, they heard a shout of Heiba-chan ring out and both turned to see Naruto running towards them. When he arrived, he was promptly met with a punch from Tsunade knocking him into a nearby wall, followed by Tsunade shouting, "Brat, if you ever call me that again in public, you'll be working nothing but D-ranked missions the rest of your life, you got that?" "Geez I mean Hokage Tsunade, you're in a great mood this morning. What happened? You lose your skirt again at the track?" Naruto replied while extricating himself from the wall and then narrowly ducking another punch from the Hokage. As Neji watched on, he was thoroughly confused at the interaction between the Hokage and Naruto. He was brought out of his thoughts by Tsunade saying, "I don't have time to play with you today, Naruto. Neji and I have important matters to deal with right now. What do you want?" Naruto turned and leveled an icy gaze towards Neji, causing the Hyuga prodigy to squirm a little before Naruto turned back to Tsunade and said, Okay, don't get your panties in a twist. I just wanted to know where Pervy Sage and Kakashi sensei were. I was supposed to start my training with them today, but I can't find them anywhere." Tsunade decided to let slide the panties comment, as the brat would probably duck another of her punches before she said, "I'm sorry Naruto, both Jiraiya and Kakashi are out on important missions right now. They won't be back until later on today. Consider this a day off for you. Why don't you go out and have some fun? Or better yet, why don't you go help your girlfriend move into her new home? I believe she's doing that today." "What? She never told me that last night." "Sorry Ba-chan, I've got to go," Naruto shouted as he sped away to try to find Hinata, leaving behind one very aggravated Hokage and one very confused Hyuga. After a moment, Tsunade took a deep breath to calm herself while nearly giving Neji a nosebleed in doing so, before she motioned him to follow her as they entered Onbu headquarters to hopefully get the answers that both of them seek. Meanwhile, it had been a couple of hours since Neji had left his two teammates at the hospital. To pass the time, they were playing cards, albeit Tenten's mind wasn't focused on the game. Her thoughts had been preoccupied with what Neji must be going through, as the pained look she saw on his face when he heard about his clansmen she had never seen before. She desperately wanted to be with him right now to support and comfort him. "Jin Dadanquat," Lee quietly said, as he laid his cards out onto the table, interrupting Tenten's thoughts. "Well, you win again, Lee Dadanquat," Tenten replied with a fake smile on her face to try and hide the concern she had for Neji. Lee knew his teammate quite well and wasn't fooled by her smile. He knew whom she wanted to be with, and he said, "Go be with him, Tenten-chan." What Lee-kun?" Tenten stammered. "Go be with him. I know you're worried about Neji. You don't have to wait here visiting with me, Dadanquat," Lee states. Tenten dropped her head in guilt, as she knew she hadn't fooled Lee at all. She looked up at Lee's stoic face as he gazed out the hospital window once again and she said, "I'm sorry Lee-kun. I guess I haven't been very good company for you this morning." "It's alright Tenten-chan, I understand you're concerned about Neji and want to be there for him. May I ask you a personal question? You don't have to answer if you do not wish to, Dadanquat," Lee says. Okay Dadanquat," Tenten replies. "Do you love him?" Lee asks. Tenten's eyes grew wide momentarily, as her face began to blush before she looked down to the floor and nodded her head and softly said, "Yes Lee, I do, very much." Lee smiled at his friend's response. He already knew that Neji loved her and was genuinely happy that they both had found one another to give their hearts to. But, he also felt a twinge of sadness, as he had been unable to find someone in his life to share his heart with. However, he refused to let any aspect of his life interfere with his friends' lives and said, "Then go Tenten-chan. I do not mind if you wish to be with him right now." "Thank you Lee-kun," Tenten replied, as she threw her arms around Lee and hugged him fiercely. "You are most welcome Tenten-chan. I hope Neji realizes how very lucky he is to have you. You are a good woman. Had I not already given my heart to Sakura-chan, I could see myself very easily giving it to you Dadanquat," Lee remarked as he released Tenten from her hug. "That's very sweet of you Lee-kun. I'm sorry Sakura never saw what a good man you truly are. But I'm positive that one day some lucky girl is going to discover that and she will be very happy for the rest of her life Dadanquat," Tenten said as she wiped a tear from her eye and stood to leave. "One day perhaps Dadanquat," Lee replied, though the tone in which he said it seemed to lack any conviction. Tenten saw the depressed look on Lee's face and her heart seemed to tighten in response to his loneliness. After a moment, she finally said, "It will Lee, you just have to believe. Neji and I will come visit you tomorrow. You take care and get some rest. Please don't. As I said before, I do appreciate both of you coming to visit me, but you both have full and rich lives to experience with one another. You need not waste your time to see me. Both of you go and live your lives to its fullest. I do not want my life to be a burden to the both of yours. Lee solemnly replied. Lee-kun, we don't feel we're wasting our time when we see you, and we don't consider you a burden in our lives. You're our teammate, and even more important, you're our friend. I'll even let you in on a little secret. I know deep down Neji considers you his best friend, even if his stuck-up tight-ass Hyuga attitude would never allow him to openly admit it. Tenten remarks. Well, you'll just have to help Neji change that attitude, won't you, Tenten-chan? Lee says as he and Tenten hug once more before they exchange goodbyes and the young Kunoichi leaves. Lee stands leaning against the closed door for the longest time, before breathing a forlorn sigh as he grips his crutch to move over to his bed. Suddenly, the crutch slips on the floor and Lee comes crashing down onto it. In a moment of frustration and rage, Lee screams out in anguish and smashes the crutch against the bed frame, breaking said crutch into several pieces. As he pulls his body up and leans against the side of the bed, a single tear rolls down his face as he quietly says to himself in despair, God, I cannot live like this anymore. Upon saying this, Lee drops his head down and a cloud moves in front of the sun, darkening the once bright room, but matching the darkness Lee currently feels in his life. Meanwhile, many miles away from the village, a certain silver-haired ninja stops for a moment and attempts to catch his breath. He carefully lays his former student down on the ground before reaching into his pocket to retrieve another red food pill to ingest. Kakashi knows to take another pill is a very dangerous thing to do. It may even cost him his life, as very few people have ever taken more than one red food pill on the same day and lived to tell about it. But Sakura's condition has been deteriorating the past several hours and they are still far from Konoha. Kakashi feels he has no choice in the matter. If Sakura is to live, she must receive medical treatments for her injuries as quickly as possible. As he swallows another pill, he once again feels the immense enhancement of chakra begin to flow throughout his body. He kneels down and softly picks up Sakura and begins speeding through the forest once again. Silently, he prays the sacrifice he's making will not be in vain. If he can just get Sakura back in time to save her life, he'll gladly accept the consequences of his actions later on. Just hang on a little bit longer, Sakura. I'll bring you home, I promise, Kakashi says as he races on. Chapter 15, The Evil of Hyashi Hyuga. As Lady Tsunade and Neji wait for the Hyuga prisoner to be brought before them in the interrogation room at Onbu headquarters, a myriad of thoughts race through Neji's mind. Why did members of his branch of the family attack Naruto? It made no sense. The Hyuga side branch bears no animosity towards Naruto. Neji had only recently learned that the side branch are some of the few people in all of Konoha who actually respected the Yondaim's wishes that Naruto be viewed with honor as the jailer of the Kyuubi demon. But they were forbidden to ever help or support the young boy growing up, per command of Hyashi Hyuga and the main branch of the family. Hyashi Hyuga, Neji was positive he is the one responsible for this attack, but he needed to hear it from his clansmen and find out the reason why. Just then the Hyuga prisoner arrived flanked by two Onbu guards. He carried the usual Hyuga arrogant gait to his walk and his head was held high as befitting a Hyuga clan member. However, once he caught sight of the glare Neji was directing towards him, his head dropped down in shame and he quietly sat down in front of the Hokage and Neji. Tsunade ordered the guards out of the room and once they left, she turned her attention back to the shackled Hyuga prisoner and looking at a file said with authority. Alright, prisoner number 1472H, you and your co-conspirators are charged with arson and the attempted murder of a Leaf Village shinobi. You and the other defendants have already confessed your guilt in these crimes, and I am ready to pass judgment. The penalty for your atrocious acts is that you and your cohorts are to be executed forthwith. However, per Neji-sama's request, I have delayed passing this sentence to learn the reasons behind your crime. If you divulge why you committed these criminal acts, and I find there are extenuating circumstances to your crimes, I am willing to commute your sentence to prison time rather than the death penalty. As of right now, you and your co-defendants have refused to reveal your motives behind these crimes. This is your last opportunity to tell the truth. Why did you and your brethren attempt to kill Naruto Uzumaki? The Hyuga prisoner sat silently in his chair staring at the floor, before an enraged Neji leapt up from his chair and slammed his fist onto the table and shouted. Answer the Hokage's question, Sulu, I commanded, and look at me when I'm speaking to you. You're a Hyuga, damn it. Show some pride in yourself and quit staring at the floor like an idiot. Sulu looked up towards Neji and his lips quivered as he stammered out a response. PL, please forgive me, Neji-senpai. You don't know what you ask of me. If I tell you the truth of why we committed these crimes, it could mean the death of several branch family members, including yourself. What are you talking about? Neji asks, the anger still evident in his voice.
I cannot answer, Neji-senpai.
Neji walks over to Sulu and strikes him across his face before saying with disgust. You dare refuse a direct command from your clan leader. I don't care what orders you are under from the main branch. I want to know why you and the others tried to kill my comrade and the Aibo, love, of Lady Hinata. And I want to know now, damn the consequences to myself. Sulu sat in the chair looking at Neji for a moment and shook his head no, before he dropped his head in shame and guilt. Neji was about to strike him again, when Tsunade caught his arm and sternly said, "Enough, this is getting us nowhere. Neji, please sit back down. Now, Sulu is it? I give you my word as Hokage, any information you divulge today will only be known by the people in this room. Please, both my office and Neji-sama here only wish to help you and your clansmen. But we have to know the truth about why you did this?" Sulu looked up to the Hokage and then over to Neji, who nodded his head in approval before he sighed heavily and said, "Very well Hokage Tsunade, Neji-senpai, I shall reveal everything to you both, but what I tell you must never leave this room. If it does, I'll deny I ever said it. Do you agree?" Both Tsunade and Neji nodded their heads in assurance, and Sulu began to tell his tale. Early yesterday afternoon, Hiashi-sama returned to the compound enraged. For over an hour he violently ranted in the courtyard about traitorous Hyugas and one-eyed and red-eyed Jounins, and then about demons and demon-loving whore Hokages. Sulu paused a moment as both he and Neji felt extreme killing intent emanate from Tsunade, whose cocked eyebrow twitched repeatedly upon hearing that last sentence before she ordered Sulu to continue. As I was saying, Hiashi-sama was in a violent fit of rage about several people. After a while, he ordered Kato, Chao Young, Yusuke, Toshiro, Ichigo and myself to appear before him in the main chamber. When we arrived, he ordered us to track down where the demon child lived and set fire to him and his home. We initially refused Neji-senpai, you must believe that. However, he was angered at our refusal and activated the caged bird seal on us for our defiance. Upon releasing us he tasked us to do as he commanded. Again we refused, and said we bear no grudge against the Kyuubi container and would rather die than kill the person who brought life back to Lady Hinata. Hiashi then shouted that he would test that conviction. Just a moment Sulu. I show no record of an Ichigo being arrested along with you and the others. Did he escape capture by the Anbu? Tsunade asked. After a brief pause, Sulu solemnly replied. No Hokage-sama, Ichigo didn't escape. As I was about to say, when Hiashi-sama said he would test our conviction at refusing his request, he activated the caged bird seal once again on Ichigo. The rest of us had to watch in horror as Ichigo writhed in agony for several minutes before he moved no more. Ichigo is dead, exclaimed Neji in a choked voice. Yes Neji-senpai, and there was nothing we could do to stop it. Sulu said with sorrow. After a couple minutes of silence, Tsunade spoke and said. I'm very sorry for your family's loss, do you feel up to continuing? Hi Hokage-sama, I will continue. Sulu answered, as he once again began to tell his story. After we watched Hiashi-sama kill Ichigo, he turned back to us and asked if we had changed our minds about following his commands. We again refused and resigned ourselves to our fate that we would die on that day. However, Hiashi signaled another main branch member who left the room. A minute later several main branch members returned escorting our wives and children. Hiashi then said this would be our last opportunity to comply with his orders, unless we wanted another demonstration with our families. After witnessing what he had done to Ichigo, we knew we had no choice but to submit to his demands. The rest you already know. It was now Neji's turn to silently unleash a massive amount of killing intent from his body within the room. After a moment it began to subside and he asked. Why Sulu? Why would you not tell us this from the start? Because Neji-senpai, Hiashi-sama made it quite clear that if any of this information were to be told, our families would pay the price for our treachery. Sulu replied. Hokage Tsunade, surely this testimony must be enough to reduce their sentence for the crimes they committed to prison time rather than the death penalty? Neji pleads. I suppose Neji, if Sulu and the others are willing to testify before the council and repeat what he has told us here today to them, then yes their sentence would be commuted to prison confinement. No, Sulu shouted before adding. You cannot do that. The others and I will never testify in public what you have learned here today. Don't you understand? The lives of our families are at stake. And if Hiashi-sama found out I told you this, I fear he would kill you as well. Neji-senpai. Please, we resigned ourselves the moment we committed these crimes that we would submit to our fate even if it meant our death. Then there is nothing I can do Neji, if they refuse to give testimony. I now understand and even sympathize with their reasons of why and how they were forced to commit these acts. But in the end, it all boils down to the fact that they attempted to kill Naruto, and nothing can change that. No we did not. Sulu said. Both Neji and Tsunade turned back to Sulu and looked at him before Neji said. What do you mean Sulu? I mean Neji-senpai, we did not try to kill Naruto. When we arrived at his home, we made sure he was not there. We then gathered all of his personal belongings and made sure the apartment building was evacuated before we set fire to it. We then waited for the Anbu to arrive and take us into custody. Neji-senpai, I have a request to make. If you would, please return Naruto's belongings to him and please ask him and Lady Hinata to forgive us for what we have done. Please let them know that it was not something we ever wished to do. After hearing this, Neji suddenly came upon a brilliant idea and turned to the Hokage and asked, Lady Tsunade, is the sentence for arson the death penalty? No Neji, it's not. The sentence for arson is imprisonment, the length of which to be determined by the Hokage. Then without using Sulu's testimony, could we not say that the Anbu deduced that since the perpetrators of this arson made it a point to break into the targeted victim's home to retrieve his personal effects, that in doing so they would discover that the victim was not home, so there was not intent to kill, then this is nothing more than arson rather than attempted murder. Could you not simply pass judgment on arson alone? Neji inquires. Yes Neji, I believe we could do that. I'll need to speak to Aviki and we may need to alter a few reports, but I believe it could be done. But you do realize that Sulu and the others will have to be imprisoned for a significant amount of time for this to work. I understand Hokage-sama, but at least they and their families will live, provided we make it a point that none of the perpetrators ever spoke or gave testimony and that all of this was deduced by the Anbu. I believe this will satiate Hiashi from seeking retribution against them or their families. Agreed. Quat. Suan replied to the Hyuga prodigy. Sulu looked up and thanked both Neji and the Hokage several times before he said with a chill in his voice to Neji. Neji-senpai, I must warn you of this. Hiashi-sama is insane, and the hatred he now holds for you and Lady Hinata is staggering. Please be careful Neji-senpai, in the state of mind he is in, there is no telling what he might do. Please warn Lady Hinata and the both of you be on your guard. Thank you for telling me Sulu, I'll take care of everything. I'll also let your family know that you and the others are alive and well. Quat. Neji answered. Thank you Neji-senpai. Quat. Sulu said as he was escorted out the room leaving Neji and Tsunade to ponder what they have learned. After a moment Tsunade turned and asked Neji. Neji, why does Sulu refer to you as senpai? When exactly did you become the new clan leader of the Hyugas? What I have to tell you must remain a secret if I am to live. Lady Tsunade. Several months ago in a covert meeting of the elders of the Hyuga side branch, I was chosen to be the unofficial leader of the side branch. In over 200 years Hokage-sama, the side branch has never defied the main branch in such a manner. If Hiashi and the other main branch members learn of this election, it will mean a clan civil war which we are not prepared for, yet. Neji coolly replies. What do you mean yet? Suand asks. A Hyuga clan civil war is approaching Lady Tsunade. The only thing preventing it is the caged bird seal that the main branch employs to keep us under their heel. However, I can assure that once we have found a way to remove that cursed seal, the war for ultimate clan leadership will begin. And it will only end with a complete side branch victory, or the death of the side branch. Quat. Neji coldly says. Tsunade could tell by the look in Neji's eyes and the tone of his voice, that he meant every word he said. Tsunade assured Neji that what he had told her, she would share with no one. As they exited Anbu headquarters and went their separate ways, Tsunade could help but feel a sense of trepidation, as she feared that the civil war Neji described would soon be coming. And when it did, the streets of Konoha would run red with the blood of Hyugas and innocents alike. The very thought of this made Tsunade shiver as she made her way to the hospital, and she silently wondered why she ever agreed to become Hokage in the first place. This is much too troublesome. How did I let myself get talked into doing this on my day off? Shikamaru complained, as he was walking towards the Hyuga compound with Kuji, Ino, and Hinata. You're doing this because Hinata is our friend, you lazy good-for-nothing jerk, Ino shouted to her reluctant teammate, as she smacked the back of his head. Ino, be nice. Shikamaru, Kuji, I want to thank you again for helping me move my things today. It's very kind of you to do. Quat. Hinata said to her male comrades. Hey, it's no problem Hinata. You were nice enough to buy us lunch today, so it's the least we can do. Quat. Kuji replied. Yeah, I guess, it's still troublesome. Quat. Shikamaru mumbled, earning a glare from Ino. As the four of them rounded the corner to the street where the Hyuga compound was located, they could see Lady Kurenai had already arrived with a horse-drawn wagon to help facilitate the move. As they approached, the Genjutsu mistress spotted them and leapt down from the wagon before saying, You're right on time Hinata, and you brought help too. That's good, I'm sure you want to get this done as quickly as I do. Quat. When the small group of shinobi approached the main gate to the compound, they were escorted inside to the courtyard and ordered to wait until Hiashi-sama arrived to oversee everything. Hinata grew nervous upon hearing this, as she had hoped to avoid having to see her father. Kurenai was also apprehensive and wondered why Hiashi wished to supervise something as mundane as this. She felt the Hyuga clan leader must be up to something and knew she had better be on guard not only for her sake but everyone else's as well. After several minutes, The doors leading from the courtyard to the main chamber opened up and several Hyuga clan members, both main and side branch, began filing out into the courtyard. A few minutes after this, Hiashi Hyuga exited the main chamber and swaggered over to where Kurenai and the others were waiting. When he arrived, he looked upon the entire group with disdain before turning to Kurenai and saying with contempt, "So, you are my former daughter's new guardian. I guess I shouldn't be surprised, you always did have a soft spot for that failure. In fact, I believe you've helped contribute to her weakness and inability to ever be a strong and skilled shinobi for this village." Hinata showed no visible sign that her father's harsh words of her abilities had affected the Hyuga heir in any way. However, Kurenai knew that the girl was deeply hurt by what her father had just said. Trying to control the rising anger within her, Kurenai instructed Hinata to bid farewell to the Hyuga clan members she wished to, as she would not be returning to the compound after this day. As Kurenai and Hiashi watched the young girl walk off, the Genjutsu mistress turned her attention back to Hiashi and said with confidence, "Your former daughter, as you put it, is neither weak nor a failure as a shinobi. In fact, of her kunoichi classmates, she is the strongest and most capable by far. Her shinobi skills have increased dramatically over the past few months. So much so, Hiashi-sama, I fully expect her to pass the Chunin exams this year. And if she continues to improve at the rate she has been, I believe she will become the youngest kunoichi jounin this village has ever produced." Hiashi merely scoffed at this notion before saying with derision, "Forgive me if I don't give credence to your assessment of Hinata's abilities. I fear you are blinded to her true skills by your emotions you have for the girl." "We shall see then, won't we, Hiashi-sama?" Kurenai replied, before she noticed Hyashi's eyes shift for a moment to the side. Looking over towards that direction, she viewed a clan member shake his head before he gripped it as if he were in pain. Turning back to Hiashi, she saw he had his Byakugan activated, directed at that same clansman. She looked over again and saw the man suddenly take off in a sprint while charging chakra into his hand. Kurenai then looked to see where he was running to and saw it was towards Hinata. The Hyuga heir was blissfully unaware of the attacking clansman as her back was turned to him. As Kurenai was about to leap to intercept the clansman, two hands suddenly gripped her shoulders, preventing her from moving. All she could do was look on in terror as the clansman rapidly approached Hinata from behind, and Kurenai yelled, "Hinata, behind you." Hinata heard the shout of her sensei and turned around, only see one of the side branch members of her clan about to strike her with his chakra-filled hand. Hinata had no time to even defend herself and closed her eyes in expectation of what was about to happen, when suddenly an orange blur appeared in front of her and a voice rang out for all to hear of. "Rasengan!" Ino, Kuji, and Shikamaru froze where they were, as they had been running towards Hinata when they heard and saw Naruto suddenly appear in front of Hinata and drive a ball of chakra directly into the Hyuga clansman's chest. Hinata opened her eyes to see the clansman begin to spin rapidly before he was sent flying backwards across the courtyard, crashing into a wall of the main house, before slumping down unconscious. Naru-kun," Hinata exclaimed. "Stay behind me, Hinata-chan," Naruto shouted as he charged up two more Rasengan, one in each hand, and glared at all the Hyuga clan members within the courtyard, silently daring any one of them to try that again. Kurenai exhaled in a sense of relief at Naruto's intervention, before she tore herself away from Hiashi Hyuga's grasp and whipped a kunai out a second later and held it to the Hyuga leader's throat and angrily said, "The Hokage warned me of your treachery, Hiashi, but I never thought you would stoop so low as to order an attack on your own daughter. I have no idea what you are talking about, Kurenai, and I defy you to prove otherwise. I cannot control the actions of a few rogue branch members, and as you are well aware, Hinata is no longer my daughter. Hiashi replied with an evil smirk on his face. Kurenai, unable to control her anger any longer, applied pressure to the kunai at Hyashi's throat and drew some blood before saying with vengeance, "I warn you, Hiashi Hyuga, from this day forth, if any clan member, main or side, I don't care, attacks Hinata in the future, I will see you dead before that day is through. You overestimate your abilities, you red-eyed bitch, if you think you can kill me all by yourself." Hinata angrily growled towards the female jounin. "Who says she'll be all by herself?" Naruto said as he walked up to stand next to Kurenai, with Hinata standing behind him and their friends standing behind her. Now it was Kurenai's turn to smirk as she saw the Hyuga leader visibly squirm under the intense pressure of the killing intent being directed towards him by Naruto and herself. After a moment, she withdrew the kunai from Hyashi's throat and said with authority, "You've been warned, Hiashi Hyuga, I suggest you remember it." Hiashi was furious and glared at Kurenai as he wiped the trickle of blood from his neck. Looking at the blood on his hand, he began to take a step forward as if to physically confront her, before he paused as he heard a distinctive crackling sound and looked over to see Naruto slowly charging up another Rasengan. Infuriated even more, Hiashi turned towards the boy and spat with malice. "Why are you here, you monster?" "I'm here, Hyuga, to help my Haim princess move her things to her new home and to make sure nothing happens to her. Naruto coolly answers. "She is no longer a Haim, I cast her out of this clan." Now she is nothing more than peasant trash just like you. Hiashi cruelly remarks. Hinata may no longer be a Heim to you Hyuga, but she'll always be my Heim. Naruto replied with a smile on his face, as Hinata turned beet red and her heart melted at Naruto's sweet words of affection. Both Kurenai and Ino nearly swooned as well from hearing Naruto's words, and both of them silently thought that Hinata had done well for herself finding someone as special as Naruto. Hiashi also saw his daughter's reaction and in a voice filled with bile and disgust said, I want you all out of here now. You have 5 minutes to collect Hinata's things and leave. If you are still here after 5 minutes, I shall have my guards throw you out. 5 minutes, that's unreasonable Hiashi, we need a little more, 5 minutes is fine. Kurenai began to protest before Naruto interrupted her and agreed to the 5-minute time limit. Naruto then made a series of hand signs and shouted. Kage Bushin no Jutsu. Shadow clone technique. In a flash of smoke and light, the entire Hyuga courtyard was suddenly filled with 500 Naruto shadow clones. A second later Naruto yelled. Charge! Then, like a huge Naruto freight train, all the clones charged forth into the main house and up to Hinata's room. They then began grabbing and hauling every single item in that room, and quickly exiting began loading said items onto the wagon. Every single person who watched this looked on in shock as in every direction several orange blurs went by carrying something. Kurenai and the rest of Naruto's friends looked at the young shinobi in awe as he stood there in the center of the courtyard with a grin and Hinata hanging on his arm smiling as she gazed upon his face. Even Hiashi Hyuga was stunned at what he was witnessing, as the amount of chakra it was taking to maintain all of these clones was staggering. After 4 minutes, the entire wagon was filled with all of Hinata's furniture and things, when Naruto looked to his watch and said to the Hyuga leader with a hint of sarcasm. Well, we're all done and with a minute to spare. Thank you so much for granting us enough time to do this. I guess we'll be going now. Hiashi was furious that this demon child had bested him and he said to the young shinobi. Instead of helping here you brat, shouldn't you be out looking for a place to live? Everyone but Naruto was confused at this statement, but he did not want to let his friends or Hinata know what had happened the day before and he said. Don't worry about me Hyuga, I'm fine. But I do have a message to give you from Kakashi-sensei. He says he looks forward to having a conversation with you when he gets back. Hiashi Hyuga's entire body stiffened after hearing that. There were only a few shinobi in the entire village that Hiashi genuinely feared to face in battle. Kakashi was most definitely on that list after what had happened in the Hokage's office. In an attempt to hide his fear, he shouted to the departing shinobi. I don't want to see any of you around here ever again. If I do, you shall regret it. After hearing this declaration from the Hyuga clan leader, Naruto sitting in the back of the wagon as it slowly pulled away with his arm around Hinata flipped Hiashi the bird as did all 500 clones. Hinata's face turned crimson in color again and she gripped Naruto a little tighter while the rest of the people in the wagon erupted in laughter. Hiashi stood at the main entrance, his entire body shaking in absolute rage, before he slammed the doors and stormed off. It was early in the afternoon when Tsunade slammed shut the medical book she was reading in frustration and rose from her seat in the hospital library. She had spent the last 2 hours researching a way to heal Rock Lee from his injuries. Unfortunately, she had yet to find anything that would help increase Lee's chances for survival from the surgery she would have to perform. As Tsunade walked out of the library to find Shizune, she knew she would have to endure more pressure from Lee and Mitogai to attempt the risky medical procedure. But Tsunade was resolute in her decision. She would not risk the young shinobi's life on a procedure that had less than a 50% chance of survival for the patient. She knew both Lee and Guy were disappointed in her refusal to perform the surgery per their wishes. And while Tsunade was a devout gambler, she would not gamble with Lee's life no matter how much they begged. When Tsunade reached the main desk, she saw Shizune speaking to one of the jounin assigned to the Sakura retrieval mission. As he left, Tsunade walked over to her assistant and asked, "Any news yet, Shizune?" "I'm sorry Hokage-sama, but no. A few more of the search teams have returned since this morning, but none of them found any signs of the girl. We still have over half the teams out on the extended pattern of the search, but they are all due to return at various times throughout the day. Shizune dejectedly replied. So, basically the odds of success are decreasing with the return of every team. Tsunade laments. I'm afraid so, Lady Tsuan. Shizune quietly says. Well, all we can do is wait. Have there been any injuries to any one of the search teams that have returned? Tsunade asks. A few cuts and scrapes, but nothing too serious. In fact, the most current pressing injury appears to be a tooth on Kiba Inuzuka that needs to be reattached. I was just going over to take care of that when you arrived. Shizune remarked. I guess that's some good news. I certainly don't feel like having to deal with any major medical crisis today. Let's go get the Inuzuka boy taken care of and then we'll head back to the office. Tsunade states, as she and Shizune walk to the examination room Kiba is in. When they arrive, they spy Kiba sitting on the examination table holding his hand to his cheek, while Akamaru sits in his lap and his teammate and friend Shino Aburame silently standing in the corner of the room watching him. Kiba looks up and groaning in pain says to the two medical specialists. "It's about time, I've been in agony the last hour waiting for someone to take care of me !" And quat. "Shut it mutt boy or I'll tell Shizune to wait another hour if you continue to complain." Tsunade sternly says to him as she lifts Akamaru off of his lap and the dog happily snuggles into her chest while Tsunade pets him. After a moment, Shizune looks up from the file she is reading and says, "Kiba, I'm not seeing anything in Kurenai's mission report about you getting hurt. How did this happen?" Kiba grew nervous after hearing Shizune's question. He did not want to reveal that he received his injury from a right cross delivered by his sensei the night before, or the reasons behind it. Struggling to come up with a plausible explanation, he heard Shino speak up and say, "He did not get injured on the mission Shizune-sama, but rather from a sparring match during training last night right before the mission." "Well Kiba, you must have taken one heck of a shot for this tooth to become dislodged." And quat. Shizune replied as she shined a light into his mouth. "Yes, it was Shizune-sama. I guess I don't know my own strength?" Shino answered, figuring if he was going to lie to cover for their escapades, he might as well make himself look good in front of the Hokage in the process. This earned a small growl and glare from Kiba towards his teammate. Tsunade cocked an eyebrow in disbelief of this statement, as the Aburame clan was not known for either their hand-to-hand combat skills or physical strength like the Inuzuka clan was. She knew the two of them were hiding something, but at the moment she didn't really care, as there were more pressing issues on her mind. She watched with a sense of pride as Shizune expertly reattached the tooth using an interlocking chakra jutsu to hold it in place. Shizune then applied a tissue regenerative chakra jutsu to mend the gums around the tooth and seal it permanently. With a few days rest and no strenuous exertion on the mended tooth, Kiba would be good as new. After finishing up with Kiba, Shizune and Tsunade walked back out to the main desk, when they saw Okio the man in charge of the Konoha lottery walk through the hospital entrance and approach them carrying an envelope and saying, "Greetings Hokage Tsunade, I've been looking for you this morning. I have some wonderful news. You hit the Pick 3 lotto yesterday. Here are your winnings 10,000 Rios. Congratulations." And quat. Both Tsunade and Shizune stared at the money contained in the envelope and then looked at one another wide-eyed and in shock before Tsunade shouted out to the medical staff. "Get the ICU ready for incoming trauma patients, and get every available emergency medical nin to the hospital at once." One of the doctors already there questioned Tsunade about the number and the nature of the injuries of the incoming trauma victims, to which Tsunade replied, "I don't know, be prepared for anything." Lady Tsunade then leaned against the main desk and closed her eyes while muttering to herself. She had earned the nickname Legendary Sucker over the years for her inability to win at gambling no matter how hard she tried. Even worse, when she did win it always foreshadowed something terrible was about to happen in her life. Tsunade silently hoped that for once her good fortune wouldn't lead to misfortune later on. But the sinking feeling in stomach told her this would not be the case. A small bark interrupted her thoughts as she opened her eyes to see Kiba with Akamaru and Shino walk towards the hospital doors to leave. When suddenly the doors flew open and a sweat-soaked Kakashi was standing at the entrance panting while carrying a large bundle in his arms. In a dry raspy voice, Kakashi managed to choke out and gasp. "It's Sakura, Lady Tsunade, she's badly hurt." "Bring her this way now Kakashi, Shizune help him," Tsunade shouted as she rushed into the ICU ward followed by a staggering Kakashi being steadied by Shizune as they walked. Both Kiba and Shino were taken aback by what they had just seen. Even though Sakura was completely wrapped up in a long coat, there was still a significant amount of blood on the floor where Kakashi had just been standing, and then leaving a trail towards the ICU. After a moment Kiba said, "Oh man, I couldn't tell, but judging by the amount of blood Sakura is in real bad shape. I wondered what happened to her?" "We could find out if you really want to know." And quat. Shino replied. "How?" Kiba questioned. "With this little guy right here." And quat. Shino answered as he brought his hand up towards Kiba's face to show him the insect on it. Kiba looked at the bug and then said, "Is that what I think it is?" "Yes, it's the same insect I used during the written part of the Chunin exam. We can leave it here and it will gather information and relay it back to me when I call for it." And quat. Shino remarked. Kiba thought about this a moment before a slight grin spread across his face and looking back at his teammate he said, "Okay, let's do it." Shino then mentally sent instructions to the bug, which then flew off his hand and into the ICU ward. The two young shinobi then exited the hospital, with Shino telling Kiba that he'll recall the bug tomorrow morning during their planned training session with their classmates. Kiba laughed and thought this will be to impress everyone of their shinobi skills, especially the kunoichis. Meanwhile, Naruto dropped to the ground outside of Kurenai and Hinata's new apartment exhausted. He had used his shadow clones to move everything of Hinata's into her new home. However, the strain of maintaining the clones for such an extended period of time wore down even his immense chakra reserves. Hinata for her part had remained silent throughout the move, which made Naruto feel uneasy. He thought that maybe he went too far with his goodbye gesture to Hiashi and that Hinata was upset with him because of it. Standing up, he nervously walked over to Hinata and said, Hinata-chan, you've been awfully quiet. Are you mad at me or something? Hinata turned and saw the forlorn look on Naruto's face, and her eyes softened as she took his hand into hers and replied, I'm not mad at you, Naru-kun. I've just been thinking about a lot of things. Why would you think I was upset with you? Well, I thought maybe you were mad at me about what happened between me and your father earlier. And quat. Naruto sheepishly answered while rubbing the back of his head with his hand. But none of that was your fault, Naru-kun. I'm not mad about anything you did. I thought you were wonderful today. I can't think of anyone who would stand up to my father the way you did. It makes me feel proud to be your girlfriend, Hinata said while blushing as she pulled Naruto to her and hugged him with all her might. I hate to break up this special moment between you two lovebirds, but this move has worn me out. So, I'm going to take off unless you need my help with anything else? Shikamaru said. Help? Help with what? All you've done all afternoon is watch Naruto and his clones do all the work, you worthless bum. Ino screeched to her teammate. Yes, but watching them was very tiresome. I need to get some rest. I'll see you all tomorrow morning at the training field. Naruto, Hinata, you two take care. Kuji, remember to come get me in the morning. And quat. Shikamaru remarked as he began to slowly walk away. What? You can't even say goodbye to me? Ino yelled at her departing teammate. Turning around to look at the fuming blonde Kunoichi, Shikamaru replied with a smirk on his face. To say goodbye to you, Ino, would be much too troublesome. You'll just continue to talk, and that's not only troublesome, but painful as well. Ino was ready to pounce on her teammate and beat the lazy shinobi within an inch of his life for that remark. But Kuji was holding her back and doing his best to try and calm her down. He reminded Ino that she was needed at her family's flower shop later on, and the two of them bid farewell to Hinata and Naruto and walked off in the opposite direction of their teammate. Hinata reluctantly released her embrace on Naruto and told him she needed to help Kurenai upstairs. Naruto understood and kissed her before reminding Hinata that he would be back at 6 p.m. to pick her up for their date that evening. He then dashed off towards Kakashi's apartment across town to get cleaned up for that date. As he was running, he hoped that Kakashi had returned from his mission, for if he had, they could finally begin their training with Pervy Sage tomorrow. As Kakashi laid Sakura down on the examination table, he staggered off into the corner of the room and looked on as a medic nin and a nurse began to unwrap Sakura from the coat she was in, while Tsunade and Shizune hurriedly washed their hands off to the side. After the final flap of the coat was lifted to reveal Sakura, the medic nin gasped in shock and the nurse shrieked before turning her head away from the gruesome sight before her. Upon hearing this, Tsunade moved quickly over to the table and saw Sakura first time and cried out in anguish. Oh my dear God, no. Tsunade's eyes began to well with tears immediately as she gazed upon Sakura. The lacerations on Sakura's face and body were so bloody and severe, if not for the young girl's pink hair, she would be unrecognizable to anyone who knew her. Tsunade and Shizune began charging chakra into their hands and then waving them up and down the girl's body began to scan her and determine the nature of Sakura's injuries. As the extent of Sakura's injuries became clear to the two medical specialists, Tsunade turned her head and with tears streaming down her face screamed at Kakashi. What the hell happened? Who did this to her, Kakashi? Kakashi began to speak only to find that nothing came out of his mouth, as for some reason he was unable to catch his breath. He then suddenly felt a sharp stabbing pain in his chest and his legs began to shake uncontrollably, as they were no longer able to keep him upright and he collapsed in the corner clutching his chest. He tried once more to speak, but all anyone heard was a sickly gurgling sound from him. Sweat was pouring out of his body soaking his clothes, and his vision began to grow very blurry and dark. Kakashi thought he vaguely heard Tsunade shouting something, but the pounding in his head made it impossible for him to understand. In a last desperate act and taking all of his remaining strength, Kakashi lifted his arm towards Tsunade as if reaching out to her before it dropped to his side and his world went black. Kakashi, Kakashi, speak to me, Suan shouted as she watched him collapse in a heap on the floor. She then heard a raspy gurgle come from him and saw as he attempted to lift his arm towards her before it fell limp to the ground. Tsunade immediately ordered Shizune to go check on him while she and the doctor tended to Sakura. As Shizune approached Kakashi, his entire body began to violently spasm on the ground. It was then a couple more medic nins arrived and she ordered them to hold him down so she could examine him. After a moment, Shizune looked up and yelled to Tsunade. Lady Tsunade, I can't find any visible wounds on him, but his tongue is swelling and restricting his breathing. He may also be in cardiac arrest and is going into anaphylactic shock. What should we do? Just then an artery gave way on Sakura and blood sprayed forth like a fountain as the medic nin frantically tried to pack it and shouted. Hokage-sama, a rib has punctured this girl's lung and cut an artery. She's quickly bleeding out. What do we do? Lady Tsuande, Shizune shouted. Hokage-sama. The doctor shouted. Tsunade stood rigid in the center of the room, her eyes darting back and forth between Shizune and the doctor. Her forehead began to bead with sweat, as she listened to her assistant and the medic nin scream at her for guidance. Unfortunately, at that moment she was paralyzed with fear and was utterly uncertain of what to do for either Kakashi or Sakura, as a tear rolled down her cheek. Chapter 16, Unexpected Heroes Emerge. As Shizune yelled at her mentor, she quickly realized that Tsunade had gone into a panic attack, which left her immobile and useless. Unknown but to only a select few is that Tsunade had suffered for years from hemophobia, a paralyzing fear of the sight of blood. To Tsunade's credit, she had battled this psychological phobia to the point where she could function at the sight of blood, provided the person bleeding was not someone she deeply cared for. The sight of blood spraying forth from Sakura had obviously triggered this attack, for underneath her gruff exterior Tsunade did care about Sakura a great deal. Jiraiya had been correct many weeks ago when he compared Sakura to Tsunade. Though she wouldn't admit it openly, the girl did remind her of herself at that age. Even worse was the fact that many of the mistakes Sakura had made in her life reminded Tsunade of similar mistakes she had made in hers. These aspects had created a bond Tsunade felt for the girl, and seeing Sakura in such a state had taken a heavy toll on Tsunade's psyche. Shizune knew she must act quickly, and rising from the floor she quickly made her way over to the petrified Hokage, and doing the only thing she could to snap Tsunade out of her stupor, slapped her across the face and yelled, "Tsunade, snap out of it. We need you right now." Shizune, what? Tsunade stammered while rubbing her cheek. "Tsunade, I need you to get hold of yourself. Go help Kakashi, and I'll work on Sakura. And Quat," Shizune ordered with authority. Tsunade, shaking her head to clear her mind, quickly looked to Kakashi and then to the still bleeding Sakura before saying, "Yes Shizune, thank you." Tsunade rushed over to where Kakashi laid. His convulsions had stopped but he was unconscious and barely breathing. She quickly inserted a depressor to keep Kakashi's swollen tongue from choking him, while she ran a scan over his body. Tsunade realized that the symptoms Kakashi was suffering from were chemical-based. She ordered the two medic nins with her to search Kakashi's pockets. They soon found the vial of red food pills and showed them to the Hokage. When Tsunade saw what was in the vial, she cursed to herself. She knew that Kakashi had most likely overdosed on these pills in an effort to get Sakura back as quickly as he could. She then ordered the two medic nins to take Kakashi into the next room. As they were doing this, Tsunade then ordered a nurse to send out a messenger to Kuza Akimichi and order him to the hospital at once with all knowledge he is available about red food pill overdose. As Tsunade was about to exit into the adjoining room where Kakashi had been taken, she looked over once more to Shizune, who was working frantically to halt the bleeding coming from Sakura. As much as Tsunade wanted to go over and help, she knew she would only be a hindrance to Shizune and quietly said to herself as she turned to leave, "I'm so sorry, Shizune." As Shizune and Tsunade worked feverishly on their patients the rest of the afternoon and into the evening, Naruto was unaware that his former teammate and sensei were currently fighting for their lives when he came to pick up Hinata for their date that evening. Walking hand in hand with Hinata, they laughed and smiled the entire time as they made their way to Ichiraku Ramen for dinner. Along the way they passed by the main gate and noticed Mito Guy and Mitarashi Anko enter the village, both looking very tired as they were carrying a Otokagure sound ninja with them. After Guy had finished recalling the search teams all night, he had doubled back to help Anko transport the captured nin back to the village. Naruto, being curious as was his nature, decided to run over to the two jounin and find out what was going on, dragging a reluctant Hinata behind him as they ran. Upon reaching the jounin, they had flopped the prisoner down onto the ground to take a breather. Naruto looked at the prisoner a moment and then asked, "Hey Guy-san, Anko-san, can I help you with this guy? You both look pretty beat." Anko just looked at Naruto like he was crazy, while Guy smirked momentarily before flashing his trademark smile and striking a nice guy pose before saying with flair, "Thank you for the offer of assistance, young Naruto. It is good to see that your flames of youth are burning bright as always. In fact, it fills my heart with a renewed strength and vigor. I believe we will be able to complete our endeavor because of it. Don't you agree, Anko-san?" "What?" Anko replied with a look of utter confusion on her face as she stared at her green-clad counterpart. Anko then turned her head back towards Naruto and noticed for the first time a young girl with lavender eyes peeking her head around Naruto's shoulder staring at the Otonin on the ground. He was currently moaning in pain as Hinata stared at the bloody burnt stumps of his arms where his hands used to be. Anko, having listened to this moaning for the last several hours, kicked the Otto prisoner and ordered him to shut up or she would shut him up permanently. Hinata winced as she did this and in a stammering voice said, Anko-san, do you need to be so cruel to the man?
He's tied up and in great pain. I don't think he can help moaning."
Anko looked to the young Hyuga heiress and gave a throaty laugh before saying, "Cruel? I don't think I'm being cruel considering what this piece of garbage did to your Anko." Anko stopped speaking and looked over to Guy, who had interrupted her by yelling her name, and saw him shake his head, before she turned back to Naruto and Hinata and said, "No, Miss Hyuga, I'm not being cruel. There are times as a shinobi where one is required to inflict pain on their enemy. Believe me when I tell you this prisoner deserves nothing but pain in his life for the things he's done." Naruto squeezed Hinata's hand gently and she looked at his face as he gave her a reassuring nod as if to indicate what Anko had said was correct. Hinata smiled and slightly nodded her head in understanding of Naruto's silent message before Guy's boisterous voice broke the silence and said, "So Naruto, I see the rumors are true about you and Ms. Hinata. Are you two fine examples of youthful energy out on a date this evening perchance?" "Yeah, Guy-san, we are. Hinata and I are heading over to Ichiraku's for dinner. I'd invite you and Anko-san to join us, but it looks like you two have your hands full already. And quat," Naruto replied as he glanced at the Oto Nin. "Thank you for that kind offer. It does my heart proud that your youthful energy in life has not diminished your generosity towards people. But you are correct, Anko-san and I do have more pressing matters to attend to. And quat," Guy answered with zeal, while Anko once again stared at him with complete confusion on her face. Naruto and Hinata also stared at Guy with equal confusion, before Naruto finally spoke up. Yeah, okay, well we better get going. We don't want to keep you, but it was nice seeing you too. And you as well, young Naruto and Ms. Hinata. You young Genon, keep your fires of youth burning bright, but don't let it overwhelm the two of you when it comes to passion. And quat," Guy replied while winking an eye towards the couple. Hinata began to blush, as she understood the veiled meaning of Guy's statement while Naruto remained unaware of what the jounin was implying. Waving goodbye, he turned to leave with Hinata before turning back and asking, "Oh yeah, I almost forgot. Guy-san, have you seen Kakashi-sensei today?" "I saw my eternal rival early this morning, Naruto, but I haven't seen him since. I'm sorry. And quat," Guy nervously remarked. "That's okay, nobody's seen him, so I guess he is still on his mission Ba-chan told me about. If you do see him, Guy-san, please tell him I'm looking for him. And quat," Naruto stated, the disappointment evident in his voice. "I shall, Naruto. Now the two of you go and enjoy your evening together and keep those flames of youth burning bright," Guy stated as he flashed another smile and struck a pose giving the thumbs up to the two departing shinobi. Guy watched the young couple sprint away, and as soon as they were put of sight his smile became a frown and turning to Anko said in a tension-filled voice, "We have to leave right now. Let's get this Oto scum to Ibiki as quickly as possible." "What's the rush? We can rest a little bit longer. We're back in the village, we're safe." And quat, Anko absently replied. "No, we can't wait any longer. Did you not hear, Naruto? No one has seen Kakashi. He may have run into trouble and still be out there." And quat, Guy answered, the concern etched in his tone. "I hadn't thought of that." "Okay Guy, what do you want to do?" Anko asked. "Can you get the prisoner to Ibiki by yourself?" Guy inquired. "Of course I can. I carried him most of the way here before you met up with me to help finish the job. I'm not some weak-willed kunoichi you spandex-wearing jerk." Anko angrily answered. "I wasn't implying that you were Anko-san. If you can take of our friend here, I can head to the hospital. If Sakura is there, then at least I know Kakashi made it back to the village. If she isn't there, the Hokage more than likely will be, and then I can speak to her about forming a search team to look for them." And quat, Guy explained. "I apologize Guy, I wasn't thinking. I didn't mean to snap at you, I'm just tired I guess." Anko wearily said. "Think nothing of it Anko-san. Your flames of youth are just burning hot tonight. Wish me luck that our comrades are safe." And quat, Guy stated with a thumbs up and a smile before disappearing in a swirl of leaves towards the hospital. As Anko picked up the Oto prisoner and began her trek to Anbu headquarters, a couple of thoughts raced through her mind. What the hell is flames of youth and what does he mean mine are burning hot tonight? Was he hitting on me? The last thought sent a shiver down Anko's spine and she quickened her pace to deliver her present to Ibiki and the Anbu interrogation unit. Meanwhile, it had been over 4 hours of intensive surgery by Shizune and the doctors assisting her, but they had managed to halt Sakura's bleeding and stabilize the young girl. Shizune was exhausted from the ordeal and had depleted much of her own chakra to keep Sakura alive. As much as Shizune wanted to lie down and sleep for the next 24 hours, she knew her work was far from finished. Forcing herself to move, Shizune made her way to the adjacent room to check on Tsunade and Kakashi and see how they were doing. Upon arriving she found Kakashi awake, but still sweating profusely and obviously in great pain. Tsunade was off to the side of the room frantically reading the results of the latest medical scan done on Kakashi. Shizune knew something was wrong by the look on her mentor's face and in a weary voice asked, "May I be of assistance, Hokage-sama?" Tsunade looked up from the scan and saw her assistant and closest friend leaning against the doorway looking very tired and smiled briefly before saying, "Thank you Shizune, but no. Right now there isn't anything you or any of us can do until Kuza Kimichi arrives. How is Sakura doing?" Shizune lowered her head to stare at the floor after hearing Tsunade's question. The Hokage recognized that reaction and steeled herself for the answer to her query about Sakura. After a moment, Shizune lifted her head and said, "We managed to stop the internal and external bleeding, but she lost so much blood that it put her entire body into shock. We almost lost her a couple of times during the surgery, but we're able to bring her back. She's going to require additional surgeries to mend the many fractures and lacerations she received, but it's too dangerous to attempt right now in her present condition. Sakura is stable at the moment, but I want to get her vitals to more acceptable levels before we proceed any further. I'm giving her blood transfusions to bring her blood level back to normal, and I'm also keeping her unconscious for the time being to help facilitate her healing. Her prognosis is much improved from where it was a few hours ago, but right now it's 50-50 whether or not she'll live through the night. All we can do is wait and hope for the best. And quote. I see. Tell me, Shizune, was Sakura, Tsunade tried to ask in a choked voice as she looked to Shizune with tears in her eyes before her friend said, I'm afraid so, Lady Tsunade, multiple times from what I can tell. I don't know how much damage was done, but the medic nin who worked on those injuries said it was severe. We'll know more after he's finished reviewing the rape kit and has compiled his report. Shizune saw her mentor slump in defeat after hearing this news and heard a small weep come from the Hokage. Wishing to change the subject, she looked over to Kakashi and then back to Tsunade and asked, How is Kakashi doing? You said a moment ago that you're waiting for Kuza Akimichi to arrive. Why is that? He's not a medical nin from what I know. Yes, that's true, he isn't a medic nin, but he does have knowledge of how to treat what Kakashi is currently suffering from. Tsunade answered as she wiped some tears from her eyes. What is he suffering from, Lady Tsunade? Shizune asks. Red food pill overdose. Quote. Tsunade replied. Shizune immediately recognized the seriousness of that condition, and that the survival rate for people who have overdosed on that drug were bleak. Looking again towards Kakashi and seeing him grimace in pain, she asked. He seems in terrible agony, Lady Tsunade, can we not do anything to help alleviate his suffering? I don't know, Shizune, maybe? Kakashi's vitals have stabilized and perhaps we can give him something to help him rest. Let's try it. Shizune, prepare and administer 10 cc's of thiothiazine, while I go up front and check if Kuza has arrived yet. Quote. Tsunade ordered. At that moment, the aforementioned Kuza Akimichi, the head of the Akimichi clan and Kuji's father, arrived at the entrance to the hospital. Barely a second later, a green blur appeared behind him and a booming voice rang out saying, Kuza, my old friend and comrade, it is good to see you. What brings you to the hospital? Are you injured? Kuza turned around to see Guy Mito standing before him with his trademark smile and nice guy pose before answering. It's good to see you too, Guy. No, I'm not injured. The Hokage requested me to come to the hospital at once. It seems someone has overdosed on red food pills and she needs my assistance to help treat them. Guy's smile immediately disappeared and he quickly ushered Kuza into the hospital while saying, It is good that you are here, my friend. I fear the person Lady Tsunade is speaking of is Kakashi. We must hurry if we are to see that the flames of youth do not burn out within my eternal rival. As the two jounin enter the hospital and make their way to the front desk, they spy the Hokage hurriedly approaching them. Upon reaching them, Suan says, Thank goodness you've finally arrived, Kuza. It's Kakashi and he's overdosed on red food pills. Can you help? Hi, Hokage-sama. The first thing I need to know is Kakashi still conscious? Yes, he's still conscious, but in terrible pain. I just ordered a sedative to be given to him to help alleviate his suffering and let him get some rest. Quote. Tsunade replied. Kuza's eyes grew wide with fear upon hearing this, and he gripped Tsunade's shoulders with both hands and said in a panic-filled voice, Lady Tsunade, you must rescind that order at once. If that sedative is given to Kakashi, he will die. Tsunade dropped the file she was holding in shock and a frightful look came over her face, before she turned and began sprinting back from whence she came, followed by Guy and Kuza while she shouted, Shizune, stop. As this was going on, Naruto and Hinata had just finished eating dinner at Ichiraku's and were currently walking through the park holding hands. Hinata smiled as she listened to Naruto while he excitedly talked about the advanced training he was going to be receiving from Kakashi and Jiraiya. She still couldn't believe how fortunate she was to finally be with Naruto as a couple. It was her dream come true, and she prayed that nothing would ever happen to spoil this dream. When she thought of Naruto's actions earlier that day, she couldn't help but blush at how he made her feel. Naruto noticed the red tint to his girlfriend's face and smiled. He always loved it when Hinata blushed as she looked so cute and adorable when she did. Pulling Hinata close to him, he leaned his head down to kiss her when a voice called out of Naruto. Both he and Hinata turned towards the direction of that sound and found themselves facing Neji and Tenten standing before them. Back at Kakashi's room, Shizune had just finished measuring out the proper dosage of the sedative she was about to give to Kakashi. As she knelt down to administer the drug, she paused as she thought she heard a distant yelling. She decided she would go and investigate after she got Kakashi sedated. As she knelt back down again, The hospital room door suddenly flew open and Guy appeared, knocking the syringe out of her hand as it flew across the room and smashed into the wall. Shizune was surprised at this sudden entrance and action on Guy's part, and was about to say something when Tsunade and Kuza arrived, both out of breath. Tsunade then asked in a labored voice if Shizune had given Kakashi the sedative yet. Shizune told her no. She was about to when Guy appeared and knocked it out of her hand. Lady Tsunade breathed a sigh of relief, before turning around and asking Kuza. "Alright Kuza, do you mind telling us how we almost killed Kakashi with a sedative?" "Yes Hokage-sama. I do not know the medical reasons why, but Kakashi must remain awake to live." "That doesn't make any kind of sense Kuza, please explain." Tsunade remarks. "I'll try Lady Tsunade. But first I need some questions answered before I can explain. First off, how many pills did Kakashi take and over what time period did he take them in?" Kuza asks. "My eternal rival took the first pill a little after dawn this morning. I don't know when or how many pills he took after that," Guy responded. Looking at the clock and then asking what time Kakashi arrived at the hospital, Kuza knew how many more pills Kakashi had ingested and stated. "He took one more pill." "You seem certain of this Kuza, why?" Tsunade asked. "By my calculations from what you all have told me, Kakashi took 2 red food pills in a 6 to 8 hour time period. If he had taken more than that during that time, he would already be dead." Kuza cryptically replied before asking. "Hokage-sama, has Kakashi suffered any type of heart attack or failure since he's been here?" "When he first collapsed, we discovered he had suffered a mild heart infarction, which seemed to throw his heartbeat out of rhythm, but it only lasted a moment before it resumed its normal rhythm." Tsunade answered. "That's good, Kakashi must be in excellent physical condition. Most overdose cases of this drug suffer severe cardiac arrest, and of those people over half usually died because of it. This is actually good news for Kakashi. It means his body has already progressed to stage 2 of combating the overdose." Kuza remarked. "Stage 2, I don't understand any of this Kuza. What can we do right now to help heal Kakashi?" Tsunade asks in frustration. "Nothing." Kuza calmly replies. "Naruto, I'm glad I found you. I wanted to apologize to you for the actions of my clan and try to expel Neji began to say before Naruto hit him. In a daze, Neji felt Naruto's hand grip him by his throat and slam him back first into a tree and shout with rage. "Apologize, that's what you have to say. Your clan tried to kill Hinata and you think a simple apology is going to fix everything. You smug arrogant jerk. I'll pound you into paste before this night is over." Neji's eyes grew wide as he felt Naruto's hand grip his throat tighter, and he saw Naruto raise his arm to strike him once more. The lack of air was causing Neji to see stars as he desperately tried to pry Naruto's hand off his throat. As his vision started to become blurry, he waited for the next blow to come when suddenly Naruto released him. Gasping for air as he slumped down, Neji looked over to see Naruto being pulled away by a frightened Tenten and a tearful Hinata begging him to stop. Hinata then threw herself in front of Naruto and hugged him as tightly as she could, while still pleading as tears rolled down her face. Naruto looked at his sobbing girlfriend and felt horrible that he was the one causing her to cry. In that instant, he forgot all about Neji and returned Hinata's tight embrace while whispering apologies to her and stroking her hair. Tenten ran over to Neji to check on his condition, as he struggled to get to his feet. It was then that Neji remembered what Naruto had said and in a raspy coughing voice asked. Naruto, what are you, talking about? I don't know, anything about an attack on Hinata, by my clan." Naruto heard this and while still cradling Hinata in his arms, looked up and said with skepticism. "I don't know if that's true or not Neji. All I do know is that one of your side branch members tried to kill Hinata earlier today, and if I hadn't gotten there when I did to stop him, Hinata would be dead right now." Neji's eyes grew wide once again, only this time from shock as he heard the news about the attack on Hinata for the first time. He looked over to his weeping cousin still entwined in Naruto's arms and began to say. I'm sorry Hinata, Naruto. I swear to you both I had no knowledge of an attack on Hinata. I was only trying to apologize to you Naruto for my clansmen burning your home to the ground yesterday and try to explain why they did it. You lied to me Naruto. Nothing. Both Tsunade and Shizune shouted in unison. Please calm down Hokage-sama, Shizune-san. I'll explain why we can't do anything for Kakashi at the moment. Kuza said to the very agitated women. According to my family's historical records of our use of red food pills, there is no miracle remedy or treatment we can use to help Kakashi survive this overdose. Only he can save himself. Kuza stated as everyone in the room stared at him in confusion before he continued. A red food pill overdose has 3 distinct stages to it. The first stage, which Kakashi has already survived, is the initial symptoms stage. It consists of full body fatigue, pronounced sweating, periodic spasms, heart complications, and a swelling of the tongue restricting breathing. By the way, you can remove the depressors from Kakashi's mouth to keep his tongue down. The swelling is only a temporary condition and is usually gone by the second stage. Shizune immediately went over and removed the depressors, earning a weak "thank you" uttered by Kakashi before Kuza continued on. The second stage is the most difficult for the patient to endure, but they must if they are to survive. Essentially, the body must purge the drug from its system on its own. The problem is that the body's cells, which have been enhanced by the person's own chakra via the drug, does not react favorable to the loss of the increased chakra. This in turn causes intense pain for the individual as the cells begin to constrict from the loss of chakra. As if on cue, Kakashi suddenly grunts and spasms in violent pain. Had he not been strapped down in the bed, Kakashi is positive he would have attempted to knock himself out to try and quell the feeling of the fire burning within his body. After a minute, the spasms subsided and his body relaxed once more. Kakashi then realized that Kuza had stopped speaking and he looked around to see everyone staring at him with concern. Kakashi nodded his head slightly to Kuza to signal his comrade to continue. Once more Kuza began to explain what was happening. As you just witnessed, the second stage is punctuated by numerous violent spasms of almost indescribable pain, as the cells of his body begin to revert back to normal. The deaths attributed to this stage are usually due to the patient being unable to endure the pain for very long. The length of time that the second stage will last is dependent on how many pills were taken and over what time period they were taken in. So, do you have any idea, Kuza, how long this second stage is going to last for Kakashi? Tsunade asks. Kuza pauses a moment, and looks to the ground before saying in a mournful voice. I estimate, Lady Tsunade, that Kakashi must endure this second stage for another 36 to 48 hours, give or take a few hours. You lied to me, Naruto. Hinata tearfully repeated as she pulled away from Naruto. No Hinata, I didn't T. Naruto stammered. What do you mean you didn't? When I asked you earlier today what my father meant about you finding a new home, you said it was nothing. Hinata remarked. Because it is nothing, Hinata-chan. I didn't say anything to you because I didn't want you to get upset or worry about it. Naruto hurriedly replied. How can I not get upset? My clan burned your home to the ground because you're with me. How can you even want to be with me? I bring you nothing but more pain in your life. Hinata said while looking down and sobbing. Hinata, that's just crazy, you haven't done anything to cause me pain. Naruto remarked as he reached out towards the Hyuga princess. Hinata stepped back from Naruto's reach before looking up with tears streaming down her face and said. I'm so sorry, Naru-kun. I love you with all my heart, but if being with me caused you to be hurt,
I shouldn't be with you anymore.
Please forgive me. Hinata then turned and ran off sobbing as she went, with Naruto calling out to her as she sped away. Another 36 to 48 hours. Can Kakashi even survive that long in such pain? Tsunade exclaimed. I don't know, Hokage-sama. According to the records, no one has before. All I know is that he must endure the pain for that long if he is to live. Kuza answers. But why can't we give him anything to help alleviate the agony he must be going through? Shizune asks. I don't know the reasons why, Shizune-san, but I do know from our records that if the person succumbs to the pain and loses consciousness, it will trigger a heart attack from which they won't recover. That is why any sedative or painkiller given will kill him. Kuza replied. In how many cases, according to your family's records, did this occur to people who fell unconscious? Tsunade asks. In all of them, Hokage-sama. The fact of the matter is, if Kakashi lapses into unconsciousness, he will die. Of that I am certain. Kuza grimly states. The room is silent for several minutes as everyone ponders what Kuza has just said, before Tsunade speaks once more and says. Alright, let's say Kakashi makes it through the second stage of withdrawal. What can we expect from the third stage? If Kakashi can make it to the third stage, the worst will be over. The third stage only involves the patient losing bodily fluids at a rapid rate. Provided we keep Kakashi sufficiently hydrated, he should be able to weather the third stage without complications and make a full recovery after that. Kuza answered. Okay, so all we have to do is make sure that Kakashi remains awake and conscious for the next couple of days until he reaches stage 3. Tsunade remarked. Yes, Lady Tsunade, my family has created an all-natural stimulant that we have been able to use without any dire effects that can help Kakashi, but it takes over 12 hours to make. I can get started on that at once and bring it in tomorrow morning. I also suggest that someone remain with Kakashi at all times to help prevent him from lapsing into sleep. Kuza states. I shall remain by my eternal rival's side to prevent that from happening. I won't allow Kakashi's flames of youth to be extinguished before their time, this I swear, Yosh. Guy announced, as he struck another pose and flashed a smile that seemed to glow in the room. Tsunade looked over at Kakashi, whose visible eye was wide with fear, as he frantically shook his head to indicate his displeasure at the thought of Guy keeping him company for the next couple of days. A wicked grin appeared on Tsunade's face, as she had always harbored some resentment towards Kakashi about his treatment of Naruto in the past. Cocking an eyebrow, Tsunade said with a sweet voice just tinged with sarcasm. I think that's an excellent idea, Guy. I know you and Kakashi are close friends and comrades, and I think he would much rather have you watching over him than some random doctor or nurse he doesn't know. Don't you agree, Kakashi? Kakashi began to speak to voice his opinion on that, when another spasm of pain shot through his body. After a moment it began to subside and he struggled to catch his breath to speak once more before Tsunade interrupted him and said, Save your strength, Kakashi, don't try to speak. There's no reason to thank me for this, just consider it my way of thanking you for all the care and attention you gave to Naruto while he was part of your Genin team. Kakashi's head dropped to his chest in defeat after hearing that, as he realized Guy was going to be his roommate for the next couple of days no matter what he said. But deep down he also felt that he deserved such a cruel fate, as the Hokage's veiled statement reminded him of how he had failed as Naruto-sensei. As Tsunade, Shizune, and Kuza left the room, they could already hear Guy recounting to Kakashi a story of a mission his Genin team had successfully completed over a year ago with flying colors. Kuza bid farewell to the two medical specialists and promised to return as soon as possible with the stimulant for Kakashi. As Tsunade and Shizune watched him leave, Shizune spoke up and asked, I don't mean to question your choice of assigning Guy to watch over Kakashi, but Guy is a handful to be around when one is at full strength. Do you think it's a good idea given Kakashi's weakened state to subject him to Guy for 2 straight days? I do, Shizune, if for no other reason. Guy is the only person I know whose attitude and energy levels run so high, that he himself can remain awake for 2 days without problem. Plus, as a bonus, it's a nice payback to Kakashi for his lousy training of Naruto when he had him dot and quat. Tsunade answered with a small amount of mirth to her voice. But I thought you already forgave Kakashi for that, Lady Tsunade. I did, Shizune, and Kakashi is trying to make up for his past transgressions with Naruto. But just because I forgave Kakashi, doesn't mean I forgot what he did. Tsunade replied before adding, It will be alright, Shizune, trust me. Now, let's go check on Sakura. As Neji and Tenten watched on in shock as Hinata ran off in tears, they turned back to look at Naruto, who stood alone with his head hanging low as a single tear rolled down his cheek. Tenten was about to say something to the obviously hurting young shinobi when Neji beat her to it and yelled, What are you standing there for, Naruto? Go after her. Naruto just stood there unmoving before he looked up towards Neji and Tenten, and they could see the tears in his eyes as he dejectedly said, I don't think I should. I think she's right. Tenten gasped when she heard this and shouted at Naruto. How can you say that, Naruto? She's not right. You hurt her. She loves you more than anything. How can you even think that she shouldn't be with you anymore? You think I like any of this, Tenten? She is right in what she said, except us being together isn't causing me to be hurt but her. Naruto angrily shot back. What are you talking about, Naruto? You're not making any sense. And quat. Tenten said. Fine, you want me to spell it out for you guys, then I will. Since Hinata and I have gotten together, she's lost her family by being banished. She's lost her home because of me. And worst of all, there are people trying to kill her for no other reason than because she is with me. Don't you see I only bring pain and misery into her life, not the other way around like she thinks. I love her more than anything as well, but I should let her go, because I don't want to hurt her any more than she already has been by being with me, Naruto shouted in a choked voice, trying to hold back his tears. After that, there was an uneasy silence for several minutes between all three Genin as each one thought about what had happened and what had been said. Neji then slowly walked over to Naruto, who was staring aimlessly at the ground, and said to him, Naruto. Naruto looked up expecting to see Neji's face, but instead all he saw for a fleeting moment was a fist before it impacted his face and knocked him to the ground. He then heard Neji shout at him. You idiot. Never have I heard such stupidity come from someone in my entire life. And if Hinata hadn't run off, I would tell her the exact same thing. Watch it, Neji. Naruto growled in response. Oh my, Naruto's getting angry because I think Hinata is just as stupid and foolish as he is. Well, why do you care? You're no longer with Hinata because you only bring misery to her life, remember? And quat. Neji sarcastically says while Naruto glares at him before continuing. Tell me, Naruto, you've been with Hinata what, 2 to 3 months, and you think you know about her life in the Hyuga clan. You know nothing of her life in our clan. Well, listen up and see if that dense rock you call a brain can comprehend what I'm about to tell you. Naruto didn't move and just continued to glare at the Hyuga prodigy before Neji spoke once more. You say Hinata lost her family because of you. Well, let me tell you, Hinata hasn't had a family since her mother died giving birth to her sister Hanabi. The main branch led by her father felt that Hinata was a disappointment as a Hyuga. They thought she was too kind and weak to ever lead the clan, so they belittled or just outright ignored her as she grew up and focused all of their attention on Hanabi. The side branch, much to our shame, shunned her out of fear of her father and the main branch. Can you imagine Naruto, growing up in a household with over 100 relatives and still be utterly alone? She wasn't banished because of you. Hiashi has been looking for a reason for years to get rid of Hinata. You were just a convenient excuse to allow him to do just that. Now, since I've explained some of the aspects of how Hinata's home life has been, do you honestly believe that she is now miserable because she is no longer there? Hinata is ecstatic to be out of that oppressive home and living with Lady Kurenai. So, if you want to blame yourself for Hinata losing her home and family, then look at it from the standpoint that it is one of the best things that could have happened to her. What you say may be true, Neji, but it doesn't change the fact that Hinata's life is in danger because of me. Naruto replied, the sadness evident in his voice. My, we are so full of ourselves today, aren't we, Naruto? Hinata's life is in danger every day, as are all of ours with the life we have chosen to be shinobi. Now, as for my clan trying to kill her because of you, I don't know what happened earlier today, but I will find out. But I can guess that it was her father behind the attack on Hinata. Hiashi is insane, Naruto. He fears Hinata being out from under his control, and that the Hyuga bloodline will be passed on outside the clan. He would much rather see his daughter dead than allow that to happen. And he fears you, Naruto, because you have the power to shield Hinata from him. It is Hiashi Hyuga's extreme paranoia that puts Hinata's life at risk, not you. However, you are one of the few people who can protect her from this madman. Well, not anymore, since you have now abandoned her. Neji coldly states. I haven't abandoned her, I'll still be there for her as a friend, Naruto shouted at Neji, visibly agitated by the Hyuga's last comment. God, you really are a baka, idiot. It doesn't work that way, Naruto. Once you've been in a relationship with someone, when it ends there is no going back to the way things were. And as much as it pains me to say this, Naruto, do you remember when I said earlier that Hinata getting away from her family was one of the best things to happen to her? Neji asks. Yeah. Naruto replied. Well, the best thing to happen to Hinata in her entire life is being with you. Neji reluctantly remarks. What do you mean, Neji? A confused Naruto asks. I mean, since she's been with you, Hinata is finally breaking free of the emotional and psychological wall she surrounded herself with over the years. She's more outgoing and confident with herself and is no longer the timid wreck she once was around people. Even her shinobi skills have greatly improved since she's been with you. You give her strength and support and you believe in her, Naruto. I fear if you are no longer around, she will slip back into her old self and she will never recover. So, the question now is, what are you going to do, Naruto? Neji asks, his concern echoing in his question. Naruto sat on the ground trying to absorb everything Neji had said. He truthfully never realized that he had as great an impact on Hinata's life as she had in his. After a moment, he got up and brushed himself off before looking Neji directly in the eye and saying with determination. I've got to get her back. Neji grinned upon hearing this and said to Naruto with a smirk. Then what are you standing here for? Go do it. Because Naruto, if you don't show up tomorrow morning for the planned training session with Hinata by your side, I will personally kick your ass from one end of the field to the other, take a short break, and then do it all over again. You wish, Naruto said in amusement before he took off running to track down Hinata. Tenten walked over to Neji after Naruto had left and kissed him lovingly. After a minute, Neji broke off the kiss and asked. What was that for? That was for being the kind, considerate, and thoughtful man I fell in love with, and not the mean, inconsiderate, and arrogant asshole most people think you are. Tenten answered. Thank you, I think? Neji replied, as the young couple begins walking hand in hand out of the park. Yamanaka was pissed off, and the current subject of her wrath was one Naruto Uzumaki. For the last couple of hours, Ino had been systematically destroying every single Naruto shadow clone she came across. And with each clone's destruction, her anger only intensified because it wasn't the real Naruto she was hitting. It also served as motivation for her, because as soon as she did find the real Naruto, he was going to get the beating of a lifetime for making her friend cry. Ino had run into a distraught Hinata earlier that evening and tried to find out what had happened to put her friend in such a state. All she could gather from Hinata through her sobs and tears was the name Naruto and that she wanted to go home, before she ran away. That was enough evidence for Ino, who was always a hit first ask questions later kind of girl. Naruto had obviously done something to hurt Hinata and Ino was going to make him pay dearly for it, as soon as she found the real Naruto. Naruto Uzumaki was pissed off, and the current subject of his wrath was one Ino Yamanaka. After Naruto had left Neji and Tenten in the park, he dispersed several shadow clones throughout the village in an effort to try and find Hinata. He inwardly cursed at himself for teaching Hinata how to mask her chakra signature as she had learned it quite well. So, the only way he was going to locate the Hyuga princess was visually, hence the clones. However, His efforts to do this were being impeded by Ino's rampage through whichever clone she came across. Naruto could sense every clone's destruction, and with the loss of another pair of eyes to help him search for Hinata, he grew angrier. Naruto didn't know why Ino was doing this, but it was not helping him to find Hinata, so it had to end. Looking down, he checked on a large object covered with a sheet, as he patiently waited for Ino to round the corner and face him. As soon as Ino turned the corner and saw another Naruto down the street leaning against a lamppost, she sprinted straight at him with her fist cocked and yelled with vengeance. "You're a dead man, Naruto." As soon as Ino swung and missed her target, she realized this was the real Naruto and attacked him with a flurry of punches and kicks. Unfortunately, none of them connected, as Naruto quite easily blocked or dodged every single blow. After a few minutes of this, Ino grew very tired and frustrated and shouted while throwing another punch. "What did you do to Hinata, you jerk?" Naruto caught Ino's fist in the palm of his hand and held it as his facial expression went from amusement to concern, and he said, "Hinata, you've seen Hinata, where is she, Ino? I've got to know. Like I'm going to tell you, you're the one to make her cry." Ino answered as she wrenched her fist out of Naruto's hand. "You don't know what you're talking about, Ino. I need to know where Hinata is right now." Naruto angrily replied. "Well, I'm not going to tell you, and there's nothing you can do about it," Ino defiantly said, as she stood before Naruto with her hands on her hips and nose in the air. "I don't have time for this," Naruto said as he signaled several clones that appeared around Ino and began tying up her arms and legs, despite the resistance they were getting from the young kunoichi. After Ino was finally bound, Naruto walked over to her, kneeled down and said, "I'm only going to ask nicely one more time, where is Hinata?" Ino just glared at him and stubbornly refused to answer. Naruto sighed and ordered one of his clones to remove Ino's shoes. This action confused Ino greatly, and she began to grow concerned as to why Naruto was doing this. However, when she saw Naruto produce a large feather, her eyes went wide with fear and she nervously stammered. You wouldn't dare, Naruto Uzumaki." Naruto only smirked when he saw the fearful expression on Ino's face and said to her with amusement, "I seem to remember Sakura once telling me about a certain kunoichi having the most sensitive and ticklish feet in the world. Shall I test that out, Ino, or are you going to tell me where Hinata is?" 15 minutes later, Kurenai answered her door to see Naruto standing before her along with several clones carrying a bound and gagged Ino and something covered with a sheet, directly behind him. Kurenai had returned home an hour ago, only to find Hinata holed up in her room crying. But since then, Kurenai had been unable to find out what was wrong with her student and thought that maybe Naruto would have better luck than she's had and let him and the others in. Naruto asked if he could speak to Hinata, and Kurenai readily agreed and watched the young man head down the hallway, while she untied a very aggravated Ino. "Hinata-chan, I know you're in there, please let me in so we can talk." Silence was the only response Naruto received. Growing frustrated, Naruto banged on Hinata's bedroom door again and said, "Hinata, I'm not leaving until you open this door and talk to me. Please, Hinata-chan, I just want to talk to you." "Gee, go away, Naruto."
I told you I can't be with you anymore. Unquote.
Hinata said with despair, while clutching a fox plushie stuffed animal close to her chest that Naruto had won for her at a carnival. "That's what I want to talk to you about. Please let me in, I want to see your face when I talk to you, not a locked door. Unquote. Naruto pleadingly says. Once again, all Naruto received was silence, but as he leaned in he could hear soft crying coming from inside the bedroom. After a few minutes of this, Naruto's patience was at an end, and turning around to look at Kurenai and Ino, who were standing at the end of the hallway watching him, he said, "I apologize, Lady Kurenai, please send me the bill for this." "For what?" Kurenai asked. "For this," Naruto said as he turned back around and kicked Hinata's door in, shattering the lock and door frame holding it. The moment Hinata's door burst open, Hinata squeaked and threw her bedcovers over her head in some sort of vain attempt to hide herself from Naruto. Naruto for his part signaled his clones to follow him as they brought the sheet-covered item they were holding, and all of them marched into the bedroom. Ino was about to charge down the hallway to kick some ass, when Kurenai held her back and told her to wait, while the two of them slowly made their way down the hallway to see what was going on. When Naruto entered the bedroom, he could see a shivering lump underneath the bedcovers on Hinata's bed. Shaking his head, he sent the clones to the far end of the room, while he went over to the side of the bed and sat down while exhaling a heavy sigh. Meanwhile, Hinata was about to have a panic attack as one thought permeated her mind at that moment. "Naru-kun is on my bed. Naru-kun is on my bed. What do I do? What do I do?" Hinata lost her train of thought at the sound of Naruto's voice as he said with sadness, "Hinata-chan, I know you think what you're doing is supposed to keep me from being hurt, but you're wrong. You don't cause me pain by being with me, just the opposite. I've never been happier in my entire life than when I'm with you. I wasn't lying to you when I said what happened to me yesterday meant nothing. In fact, the only thing that has happened that's caused me pain Is you leaving because you think you're hurting me by being with me? Ino gasped a little bit after hearing that and felt guilty for assuming Naruto had done something to hurt Hinata. It hadn't occurred to her that Hinata was upset with something she herself had done and not Naruto. Naruto's voice broke her train of thought as she heard him say, "Hinata-chan, please say something, and let me look at you. I really don't like having a conversation with a lump on the bed." Hinata didn't know what to think as she lay under the covers. She desperately wanted to believe what Naruto was saying to her. The one thing she did know is she wouldn't survive if she had to look at his beautiful face one more time. It was all she could do to keep herself from leaping up and hugging Naruto with all her strength and never letting go, just from the sound of his sweet voice. But no, she had to remain strong. This was for Naruto's own good, no matter how much it was breaking her heart. A soft sob escaped her lips, as she forced herself to remain steadfast in her decision to let Naruto go. Naruto and the others heard the sob Hinata had uttered and it was breaking their hearts as well. After a couple more minutes of silence, Naruto grew frustrated once more and finally said, "Hinata, you have 1 minute to come out from under those covers and talk to me. If you don't, I'm going straight to Ba-chan Tsunade and request the most dangerous SS-ranked mission she has on the books. I mean it, Hinata." About 30 seconds went by before a soft yet sad voice said from underneath the covers, "You're bluffing, you could get hurt doing that." "Hurt? I'll probably be killed. But it doesn't matter, it's not like I have anyone who cares about me anymore," Naruto replied with sorrow. Another 30 seconds went by with no sound coming from Hinata. Naruto sighed and said, "Well, I guess that's it then. Lady Kurenai, do you think Ba-chan is still sober this late?" "Oh well, it doesn't matter, if she isn't that will work out better for me. She'll be easier to convince to give me the mission if she's drunk anyways. Goodbye Hinata-chan, if I don't see you ever again, please remember that I'll always love you." As Naruto began to rise from the bed, he heard a shout of no come from behind him and a pair of arms threw themselves around his torso holding him tightly as a tear-stained face buried itself into his back and he heard Hinata say in a choked voice, Don't you dare do that Naru-kun. I would die if anything happened to you." Naruto turned around and lifted Hinata's chin so he could look into her eyes. As he did this, he wiped some tears away from her face with his thumb and said, "And I will die my hime if I can't be with you anymore." Hinata looked into his blue eyes and saw nothing but love in them and couldn't take it anymore. She threw her arms around him once more and buried her face into the crook of his neck and tearfully said, I'm so sorry Naru-kun, please forgive me, I just don't want you to be hurt because of me." "Shh, there's nothing to forgive my hime. So long as I am with you, I can never be hurt ever again. And quat. Naruto quietly reassures her. It was then that Hinata noticed the clones in the room and the strange sheet-covered object they were standing by and asked, "Naru-kun, what is that?" Naruto turned around and saw what Hinata was looking at, and replied with a grin on his face, "Oh, that is a surprise I was planning on giving you on our anniversary, but I think I should give it to you now considering the rough couple of days you've had." Helping Hinata off the bed, they walked over to the object and Naruto told Hinata to close her eyes and asked if she was ready. Hinata nodded and Naruto ordered the clones to pull the sheet away before he dispersed them. Naruto then told Hinata she could look now and the sight she was greeted with nearly caused her to faint from happiness. Standing before her was a portrait of Hinata and her mother that had been painted when Hinata was only 4 years old. She hadn't seen the picture in years because her father kept it locked away in her mother's bedroom. Hinata turned around to face Naruto with the biggest smile on her face and stammered,
How?
"Well, when I was moving your stuff earlier today from the compound, I remembered you telling me once about that picture and of how much you missed seeing it. So I kind of liberated it from your father. I figured you would appreciate it much more than he ever did considering he had it locked away. And quat. Naruto sheepishly replied, while he rubbed the back of his head. It was then he thought he heard a small growl come from Hinata. Hinata could only stare at Naruto with undying love before something seemed to click in her mind and she uttered a small growl before tackling Naruto onto the bed and captured his lips with her own. So surprised was Naruto by this, that he didn't have time to react when Hinata slammed into him knocking the air out of his body. As he struggled to catch a breath, Hinata was not helping matters by straddling his chest and forcing her tongue into his mouth. Soon Naruto's world due to a lack of oxygen became such a haze, that he didn't even notice when Hinata ripped his shirt open revealing a surprisingly well-toned chest and abdomen for a 14-year-old male. As soon as Hinata crossed her arms to lift her own shirt off her body, a shout rang out of Hinata. Kurenai and Ino were shocked beyond words as they saw with eyes the size of dinner plates Hinata tackle and attack Naruto onto her bed. Their jaws were practically scraping the floor, as they couldn't believe this was the same sweet but shy girl they had come to know. When they saw Hinata rip open Naruto's shirt and then reach for her own, Kurenai finally snapped out of her shock and yelled Hinata's name. Something clicked once more in Hinata's mind and she came back to reality upon hearing her name and suddenly realized what she was doing.
Blushing worse than she ever had in her life, she leapt off Naruto and stood to the side staring at her feet and twiddling her fingers nervously. Naruto was practically catatonic, as he slowly began to breathe again, but was still in a daze over what happened. Finally, Hinata spoke up in a soft caring voice and asked, "Kurenai-sensei, can Naruto spend the night here?" After hearing this, Ino vaulted backwards onto the hallway floor. Kurenai just stood in the doorway and stared at Hinata with a look of amazement on her face, before saying with authority, "I'm sorry Hinata, with what I just saw, there's not a chance in hell of that happening. But, you don't understand, my clan burned Naru-kun's home to the ground yesterday. He has nowhere else to go. Hinata pleads. That's what Hiashi meant earlier with that remark he made. Kurenai thought, as she watched Naruto attempt to get out of the bed only to fall directly onto his butt as his bearings were still out of focus. She looked at him and asked, "Is that true Naruto? Do you have nowhere else to stay?" "Ha, what, to stay where? No, Kakashi-sensei is letting me stay with him. Yeah, no, I have no place to stay." Naruto babbled until he got one look at Hinata and the memory of what had just happened flooded his brain. "Yeah right. Kurenai said before she turned around to speak to Ino and say, "Ino, can you see to it that Naruto gets back to Kakashi's alright? He still seems a little bit out of it." "Sure, I can do that Lady Kurenai, no problem. Ino replied as both she and the Genjutsu mistress looked back to Naruto to him sitting on the bed with Hinata in his arms kissing each other furiously. Kurenai began to rub her forehead in response to this before saying, "Ino, please break that up and get Naruto out of here before Hinata loses herself completely." Ino then walked over and smacked Naruto's head, bouncing it off the wall knocking him out. She then grabbed Naruto by the collar and started dragging him down the hallway and out the front door, despite Hinata's vehement protests. Kurenai thanked her before closing the door to deal with Hinata. As Ino stared down at the unconscious body of Naruto, an evil grin spread across her face. She hadn't forgotten about being hogtied earlier that evening by him, and giggled to herself as she thought of a way to extract her revenge. She then hoisted Naruto onto her shoulder, as her idea gave her renewed strength and she exited the building. While this was going on, Tsunade and Shizune had spent the last few hours in Sakura's room monitoring her condition. Fortunately Sakura's vital had slowly but surely been improving, and they discussed the possibility of attempting to wake the injured girl tomorrow morning. They finally decided to head back to the office for a nightcap and some rest. As they were walking back to Hokage Tower, Tsunade in a contrite voice said, "Shizune, I wanted to let you know how proud I am of you. If you hadn't taken charge at the hospital when I had my attack, we could have lost both Kakashi and Sakura. I know it wasn't easy for you to work on Sakura considering your personal feelings towards the girl. You trained me better than that Lady Tsunade. I would never let my personal feelings interfere with saving a life as a medic. It could have been Orochimaru on that table and I would have worked just as hard to save him as I did with her. I may dislike the girl for the pain she's given my Naruto-kun, but I would never sit idly by and watch her die without doing all I could to save her. Shizune quietly replied, "Well, in my opinion the work you did on saving her life is nothing short of miraculous, and I am honored to be your teacher and your friend. Tsunade says while bowing. "And I am honored to be your student and friend Lady Tsunade. But let's not get ahead of ourselves with Sakura. She's not out of the woods yet. Sakura's got a long night ahead of her and all we can do is pray that she'll still be with us in the morning. Shizune stoically says. Tsunade nods her head in agreement, as the two medical specialists enter Hokage Tower for the drinks both of them need and deserve after a day like today. Chapter 17, Sakura's return revealed. It had started out as a good day for Tsunade when she awoke this morning. Both Sakura and Kakashi had survived the night, and the prognosis for the both of them had improved greatly since the night before. Unfortunately, there are very few good days in the life as Hokage and today was no exception. After learning about the status of Sakura and Kakashi, Tsunade had received a message from the council demanding an emergency meeting with her. Apparently they had heard, no doubt through Danzo's spy network, of what had happened and of course were in a panic about it. Anything that even remotely involved Orochimaru tended to strike fear in even the most diehard council member. So Tsunade had spent a good deal of the morning attempting to assuage the council's frightened concerns and assure them that everything was under control. However, due to the lack of information, the council was demanding that the Haruno girl be awakened from her medically induced sleep and interrogated to see if she had any information in regards to the snake Sanin. Tsunade objected most strenuously, saying to awaken the girl too soon might put Sakura's life in jeopardy. After arguing for most of the morning, Tsunade finally agreed, but only under the stipulation that the council rescinds the death penalty for the Haruno girl when her trial for treason began. The council led by Danzo and Hiashi readily agreed. They could care less about the life or death of one insignificant kunoichi. They only wanted to know if she had any information they could use to their advantage. It was a small victory for Tsunade over the council, as she made her way over to the hospital. Unbeknownst to them, she and Shizune had already planned on attempting to awaken Sakura this morning. But since the council had been so insistent, Tsunade decided to use it to her advantage to help Sakura as much as possible for her trial. When Tsunade entered Sakura's room, she saw that Shizune and a medic nin and nurse were just finishing up preparations to awaken Sakura. Shizune looked up to see her mentor enter the room and asked, "Hokage-sama, did everything go all right with council this morning?" "It's the council, Shizune, rarely does it ever go right with them. But it did go better than I expected, I'll fill you in later." "So, are we ready to wake up our wayward kunoichi?" Tsunade asks. "Hi, I believe so, Lady Tsunade. We just finished final preparations and her vitals are stable. We were just waiting for you to return as per your orders. And quat," Shizune replied. Tsunade just nodded her head as she gazed upon the heavily injured girl. Sakura practically looked like some sort of incomplete mummy, as only one half of her face was still visible and not covered with bandages. In fact, the entire upper half of her body was wrapped in bandages along with her broken arm being held in a sling in front of her. "Alright Shizune, let's do this. And quat," Tsunade says. Shizune nodded her head and began to administer the medication to awaken Sakura, and then everyone patiently waited for the drug to take effect. After a few minutes, Sakura's lone visible eye began flutter, and she inhaled a deep breath before it opened fully. The pupil of Sakura's eye began to move about in a rapid manner, as if trying to ascertain where she was. Tsunade leaned forward to let Sakura get a better look at her in the hope that seeing a recognizable face would help ease Sakura's obvious confusion to her surroundings. Sakura's eye then fixated on Tsunade, and the Hokage smiled, thinking that Sakura recognized her. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case, because as Sakura stared at the slug Sanin, the only face she saw was that of Sasuke. Then the memories of what had happened to her came forth like a tidal wave in her mind, and in Sakura's disoriented state, she let loose a terror-stricken scream and began to violently thrash about. Tsunade immediately attempted to hold the screaming girl down for fear Sakura would reopen her wounds, and shouted in order to knock the girl out once more. While Shizune hurriedly measured out a sedative into a syringe, Tsunade and the medic nin desperately tried to keep Sakura still while listening to her frantic screams and sobbing pleads for help. "No. Stay away from me, Sasuke. Ah. Please, Sasuke, why are you doing this? Ah. Oh god, it hurts. It hurts. Naruto, where are you? Ah. Make him stop. Please, Naruto, make him stop. He's hurting me. Oh god, Sasuke's hurting me. Ah. Please, Naruto, please save me." Shizune finally got the sedative injected into Sakura, and after a couple minutes her body began to relax and her screams and pleading started to die down. Soon Sakura began to drift off to sleep once more, but not before saying in a drowsy, sorrow-filled voice, I'm so sorry, Naruto, it should have been you. Please save me, Naruto, I love you, Naruto." With those final drifting words said, Sakura once more fell into unconsciousness while Tsunade relinquished her hold on the girl. After taking a moment to catch their breath, Tsunade and Shizune examined Sakura to see if any damage had been done to her. Surprisingly, they found nothing, which in itself was a miracle considering how violent her outburst had been. Tsunade decided to give Sakura another 24 hours of rest before they would attempt to reawaken the young girl once more. Shaking her head sadly, Tsunade looked at the sleeping kunoichi and sighed. She knew deep down that while they could mend Sakura's physical damage in a short amount of time, the psychological damage done by Sasuke's attack might take years to heal. Meanwhile, as Sakura's awakening was taking place, her former classmates had gathered for another training session with each other. However, like the last time, Neji, Tenten, Kuji, Shikamaru, Temari, and Ino were waiting patiently for their other classmates and friends to arrive. As they were waiting for Naruto, Hinata, Kiba, and Shino to arrive, this gave Ino ample opportunity to tell Neji, Tenten, and Temari about what had happened at the Hyuga compound the day before. And then Naruto said to Hinata's father, "She may no longer be a Heim to you, Hyuga, but she'll always be my Heim." And quat, Ino said in her best imitation of Naruto's voice. "Oh my god, that is so sweet." Tenten squealed. "And very romantic too." And quat, Temari added. "Why can't all guys speak and act like that about their girlfriends?" Tenten lamented while Temari nodded her head in agreement. Then the two kunoichis shot disapproving glances towards the respective males each was sitting by. Shikamaru just rolled his eyes and looked up to the clouds, while Neji muttered something unflattering about Naruto under his breath. Then Ino finished telling the story, ending it with a description of Naruto's 500 shadow clones flipping off Hiashi Hyuga as they left. Needless to say, this brought about more gushing from the kunoichis present about how romantic Naruto is to stand up to Hinata's father like that. Both Shikamaru and Kuji were still amazed that Naruto had done that to arguably one of the most powerful men in the entire village. Neji's reaction was the most surprising of all, as he shocked everyone present by doing something he rarely ever did. He laughed. The image of 500 Narutos giving Hiashi Hyuga the bird, and Hyashi's probable reaction filled Neji's mind, and he thought that was the funniest thing he's ever heard in his life. After Neji's laughter finally died down, Ino motioned for Tenten and Tamari to come with her as she had another story to tell them about Hinata and Naruto from last night, but didn't think the guys should hear about this one. As Neji, Shikamaru, and Kuji looked on with curiosity, they would periodically hear from one of the girls in between giggling of, "No way. Naruto did what? Hinata did that? Oh my god. I didn't think she had it in her." As the girls still giggling headed back over to the guys, Naruto appeared giving Hinata a piggyback ride as they greeted everyone. When Ino saw them she smirked, as now was the time to get some payback on Naruto for tying her up like a calf and tickling her last night. Unknown to everyone but Ino, she had stopped by her home and gotten some specialized ink from her father's den. It was unusual ink similar to invisible ink that was used for secretive messages or documents. When applied, nothing would appear until the document was fully exposed to direct sunlight. Ino had used it to paint a little message onto Naruto while he was unconscious last night. Now, all she had to do was to get Naruto to remove his shirt, for her revenge to come to fruition. Fortunately she had just the plan to do that and bounded over to Naruto and Hinata with a can of soda she had been vigorously shaking this morning. When she reached the young couple, she smiled sweetly and in a very contrite voice said, "Hi Naruto, Hinata. Naruto, I just wanted to apologize to you about last night. I was wrong for jumping to conclusions and I'm sorry. I know it's not much, but I got you a can of your favorite soda, and you look pretty thirsty right now." "No, I'm okay right now. But, thanks Ino, I'll have some later on, and don't worry about last night. I know you were just looking out for Hinata, so I really can't be mad at you for that. And quat. Naruto replied with a grin. "Oh, alright I guess. And quat." Ino answered, the disappointment in her voice evident because her plan was failing. Hinata heard the disappointment in Ino's voice and thought it was because Naruto had refused to take a drink of the soda and said, "Naruto-kun, you must be thirsty, you carried me all the way here. Go ahead and have a drink." Naruto looked at Hinata for a moment and smiled before agreeing and taking the soda from Ino. Ino slyly stepped back a little bit, taking Hinata with her, and began to talk aimlessly to the Hyuga princess before a loud fizzing sound erupted and everyone looked over to see Naruto getting sprayed with the soda he had just opened. Ino, feigning concern, immediately apologized and grabbed a towel for Naruto to use. His shirt was completely drenched and Ino said he should remove it and let it dry out in the sun, to which Naruto agreed and began taking off the soaked garment. Hinata began to blush a little bit at the sight of Naruto without his shirt. However, her revelry was short-lived as she began to hear a few snickers from her classmates and Ino had stepped back and was laughing. Turning back to an equally confused Naruto, Hinata was mortified when in big bold letters a message had appeared on Naruto saying property of Ino Yamanaka. At this point Ino was clutching her sides and doubled over laughing hysterically. Naruto saw the shocked look on Hinata's face, and following her line of vision to his chest, looked down to see Ino's message sprawled across it. His blood immediately began to boil and he let loose a massive amount of killing intent before shouting, "You are so dead, Ino." As Naruto began to march forward and take apart Ino piece by piece, Hinata stopped him and looking into his eyes said, "No Naruto-kun, I can't let you beat up Ino, she's my friend." "Yeah Naruto, thwppppp," Ino remarked, while pulling her bottom eyelid down, and sticking her tongue out giving Naruto the raspberry. But Hinata-hime, I can't let her get away with this." Naruto pleads. "I know what Ino did was mean Naruto-kun, but it's not your job to make her pay for it." Naruto just scowled and growled in disappointment, before hearing Hinata say in a very dark voice, "It's mine." Ino's smile immediately disappeared after hearing this and she looked at Hinata's face, which bore a very scary and determined look to it, and this was before she activated her Byakugan. As Hinata advanced towards Ino, the blonde kunoichi realized that she hadn't thought her plan for revenge on Naruto all the way through, and began to stammer. Come on Hinata. It was just a joke to pay him back for tying me up and tickling me last night. You're not really mad about this, are you?" Hinata just continued to move towards the nervous kunoichi before saying in a voice filled with anger, "Naruto-kun only did that, Ino, because he was worried about me and wanted to find me. You however did this out of spite. So to answer your question, yes Ino, I am very mad at you about this." Hinata then lashed out with one of the Hyuga clan's most prized fighting techniques and yelled out, "Haki Rakuju Ion Sho, gentle fist style 8 trigrams 64 palms, 2 hands, 4 hands, 8 hands, 16 hands, 32 hands." Ino crumpled to a heap onto the ground after taking the multiple strikes from Hinata, effectively closing her main chakra points. Hinata had been merciful to her friend and only used half the normal strikes of that technique as she stood over Ino breathing heavily, her attack having used quite a bit of energy. Ino came to one conclusion about her new best friend. Do not fuck around with Naruto anymore now that he is her boyfriend. Hinata knelt down and put Ino's arm into a painful taijutsu arm lock and said. What do you have to say for yourself, Ino? I'm sorry, Hinata, Naruto. It was a stupid prank and I'll never do it again. Ino replied while wincing in pain before she added. Are we cool now, Hinata? Not quite. Hinata replied before adding a little more pressure to the arm lock and shouted for everyone to hear. Whose property is Naruto? Yours. Ino quietly stammered in response. What was that? I can't hear you. Hinata yelled. Yours. Naruto Uzumaki is the property of Hinata Hyuga and no one else's, Ino cried out for all to hear, as the pain in her arm was becoming unbearable. Hinata smiled and released her friend's arm. She then knelt down and reopened all the chakra points on Ino she had closed and helped her off the ground before quietly saying in a saddened voice, because she feared she had lost Ino as a friend over this. I'm sorry, Ino, I didn't want to do that. But I won't let anyone humiliate Naru-kun while I'm around, not even you. I hope we can still be friends. Ino looked at the forlorn Hyuga princess while rubbing her arm to bring some feeling back to it. After a moment, she realized that she had been the one at fault in this entire ordeal and said. No, Hinata, I'm the one who's sorry. I was wrong in doing this and I had that coming. I still want to be your friend if you'll still have me? Hinata's eyes grew wide in relief of hearing that and she smiled and nodded her head before they embraced in a hug. Ino then whispered into Hinata's ear. I know a way I can make this up to you, Hinata, if you're interested. Do you know that medical jutsu that allows you to remove topographical poisons or chemicals from the skin? Hinata released the hug and looked at her friend in a confused manner before answering that she did know that jutsu. Ino then smiled and whispered once more into her ear. Well, I'm pretty sure that jutsu would work in removing my message, but it would require you to move your hands all over Naruto's chest, if you want to, that is? Hinata's face blushed slightly, and she began to chew on her bottom lip a little bit, before turning around to look at the shirtless Naruto and then back again at Ino. A wicked grin spread across Hinata's face and she nodded her head in approval to her friend. Hinata then walked over to take Naruto's hand and lead him to the bleachers before he stopped her and said. Hinata-chan, I'm not sure I like being called the property of anyone. Hinata just looked at Naruto's face a moment before she grasped the back of his head and devoured his lips in a kiss, earning a muffled gasp from Naruto. After getting over the initial shock when she did this, Naruto quickly succumbed to the pleasurable feel of her lips and wrapped his arms around Hinata's waist to pull her closer to him and return the kiss with a ferocious passion. Their friends looked on in amazement at the two kissing, and the other kunoichis present felt their faces get flushed, as the scene before them was very romantic as well as hot. After a minute, Hinata finally broke off the kiss, and seductively said to a now breathless Naruto. So Naru-kun, do you still mind being called my property? Huh? Was Naruto's dazed reply, which caused Hinata to giggle and say. That's what I thought. Come on, Naru-kun, and I'll get that message removed from you. As Hinata and Naruto sat down at the far end of the bleachers, Hinata charged some chakra into her hands, activated the jutsu, and slowly began rubbing her hands over Naruto's chest to remove the chemicals of the ink, when Kiba and Shino finally arrived. It's about time you guys showed up, now can we get some training done? Neji says with annoyance to Kiba and Shino. Well, you can't expect two of Konoha's most valuable shinobis to be worried about showing up on time for a training session with some mere Jinan. Kiba answers with a swagger to his voice. Most valuable shinobi, you've got to be kidding. Shino perhaps, but Yudobi, don't make me laugh. Neji replies with derision. Yeah, me, you arrogant prick. I didn't see the Hokage assigning you an A-ranked mission like we got the day before yesterday. Neji was about to reply when he was interrupted by Ino, asking if Shino and Kiba were on the same mission as her parents and Lady Kurenai. Kiba just grinned widely before flexing his biceps at Taiten and answering with a smirk. Yeah, they were on the same mission as us. In fact, all of the Leaf Village's top shinobi were on that mission. I guess that answers why you weren't included, Neji. HMMPH, the Hokage must have been truly desperate to include you in such a high-ranked mission. What could have been so important that it required your minor skills, Kiba? Neji asked with sarcasm. How about the betrayal and defection of a Leaf Village shinobi? Is that important enough for you? Kiba growls with anger. Everyone turned their attention to Shino, and stared at the Aburame prodigy as if silently asking if what Kiba was saying was correct. After a moment, Shino adjusted his sunglasses and uttered two words. It's true. Needless to say, everyone was a little stunned to hear about another defection of a shinobi from the village. It hadn't been that long since Sasuke's defection and his betrayal was still fresh in everyone's mind. Ignoring his classmates' surprised reactions, Kiba went on to say that because of his team's exceptional tracking skills, they were sent out along with all the other top shinobi to track down the traitor and bring them back or kill them outright if they refused to return, hence the high ranking of the mission. The news that this was a search and destroy mission shocked everyone even more than hearing of another defection. After a minute of silence while everyone absorbed what they had just heard, Tenten finally spoke up and said, "Wow, you guys were really on such a high-ranking mission. That's incredible. We sure were, Tenten-chan. How about I take you out to dinner tonight and I'll tell you all about it. And quat." Kiba replied before taking Tenten's hand and kissing it, much to the kunoichi's embarrassment. Suddenly, a massive amount of killing intent was felt by everyone, but especially Kiba, who quickly turned around to come face to face with Neji, who said in a voice dripping with malevolence, "How about you tell us all about it now, dog boy, and step away from Tenten before I'm forced to put you down. I'd like to see you try it, white eyes. Besides, what do you care about Tenten for? She's just your teammate." Kiba growled back, "I'll show you what Tenten is to me, you mangy mutt." Neji shot back before quickly pulling Tatan up from her seat and smashing his lips onto hers in a soul-searing kiss right in front of the bewildered Inuzuka heir. Tenten was momentarily shocked when Neji did this, but quickly returned the kiss with a passionate fervor that only angered Kiba even more. After a minute, Neji broke the kiss off while holding a now breathless Tenten in his arms and said to Kiba while activating his Byakugan, "Now back off from my woman before you get neutered, dog boy." An enraged Kiba was ready to attack Neji, before Shino and Akamaru pulled him back away from Neji. Kiba was too blinded by anger at the moment, but they both knew that were he to fight Neji, he would be on the losing end of that outcome. After a minute or two, Kiba finally calmed down due to some coaxing from Akamaru and Shino before he said while looking at Tamari and winking an eye, "Whatever, branch member, you're just lucky I'm in such a forgiving mood. There are plenty of other girls out there who would love have me as their boyfriend." A chill went through Tamari's spine, as the thought of Kiba pursuing her made Tamari feel very nervous. She needed to squelch any hopes that Kiba might have of being with her right now. If they had been in Suna, she could have just beaten the Inuzuka to a pulp and been done with the matter. However, she wasn't in Suna, but Konoha as a duly appointed ambassador for her country, and she was pretty certain that were she to give a beating to the heir of one of Konoha's most prominent clans, this would cause serious problems politically in the new but fragile alliance between the two nations. After quickly assessing her options, Tamari decided there was only one thing she could do to curb Kiba's attention. Taking a cue from Neji's earlier actions, she turned to Shikamaru and grabbed his face before crushing her lips onto his in as passionate a kiss as Neji had given to Tenten. "What the hell?" Kiba and several others either said or thought. Shikamaru attempted to push the Sand Kunoichi off of him, but her grip was too strong for him to overcome. He finally gave up, and wrapped his arms around her and returned the kiss with fervor while thinking, "Damn troublesome woman, I didn't want to let the others know about us this soon. We only had our first date last night. Damn it, how do I get myself into these troublesome situations?" Tamari finally broke the kiss off, and saw the annoyed look on Shikamaru's face and knew she would hear an earful from him later on about this, but she didn't care. She knew how to deal with Shikamaru if she wanted to, as she laid her head onto his shoulder and smiled contently while staring at Kiba. At this point, Kiba was fuming, as he was now 0 for 2 with the kunoichis present. It seemed every kunoichi that he knew was pairing off with someone else. That left only Ino, as he looked over to her and grinned while cocking an eyebrow. Ino saw this look and rolling her eyes said with conviction, "Don't even think about it, I'll go out with Bug Boy before I'll ever go out with you." "Thank you for the offer, Ino-san, but I'm currently in a relationship with a girl from another insect clan. Besides, you're not really my type anyway. And quat," Shino calmly stated. "What do you mean I'm not your type? I'm every man's type," Ino shouted, feeling very insulted by Shino's statement. "I meant no offense, no-san. And quat," Shino replied. At this point, Kiba said while laughing boisterously, "Ha, ha, ha, looks like I'm not the only one getting shot down today. Care to change your mind about you and me, Ino?" "Grrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrr Are the two of you going to tell us about this traitor who betrayed the village or not? A still aggravated Neji asks. Yeah, we'll tell you about it, but we should really wait until Naruto is here. And Quat. Kiba answered. Naruto is here, he's with Hinata over there. And Quat. Tenten replied, as everyone turned to look to the far end of the bleachers at the couple. The sight that greeted them caused many of the Konoha 12 to blush, except for Neji, who developed a facial tic as he watched the scene before him. The message on Naruto's chest had long since been removed, though this had been oblivious to Naruto and Hinata along with everything else happening around them. At some point, Hinata had ended up in Naruto's lap with her eyes closed and her head lying on Naruto's shoulder while she continued to slowly rub her hand over his chest and abdomen. Naruto for his part also had his eyes closed, as he held Hinata close to him while his hand slowly moved up and down the side of her body. Finally, Neji could take no more of this and shouted. You can stop now, Hinata, the message boss been removed already. Hinata heard her name being shouted and quickly realized her current position and actions before turning bright red and jumping off Naruto. Much to his disappointment, he stood up and wrapped his arms around Hinata's waist from behind, causing her to blush even more, before groaning in annoyance. "What the hell is so important you have to interrupt us? Be grateful, that's all I'm doing to you, Naruto." Neji replied, before adding, "I'm interrupting you because Kiba and Shino say you need to hear about this shinobi who betrayed the village and defected." "What do I care? I'm already dealing with a traitor from my own team. I don't need to another one to deal with. And quat," Naruto casually replied as he rested his chin on Hinata's shoulder. "Well, you should care, Naruto, considering this traitor is also from your team. And quat," Shino stated. "What?" Naruto exclaimed. "That's right, Naruto. The shinobi who betrayed and left the village 2 days ago is one Sakura Haruno," Kiba announces for everyone to hear. Before Kiba could blink, Naruto had grabbed his shirt collar and lifted him off the ground. Naruto had his fist cocked back, while his other hand held Kiba, and shouted with fury, "If this is a joke, Kiba, it isn't funny. Sakura would never betray the village, never. She just wouldn't do something like that, she wouldn't." "Well, she did, Naruto. If you don't believe me, ask Shino." Kiba spat while wrenching himself from Naruto's grasp. Naruto turned and looked at the insect master, who lowered his head slightly and said, "I'm sorry, Naruto, but I'm afraid what Kiba has said is correct. It can't be true? Sakura couldn't do this, she couldn't?" Naruto stammered. It was at this point that everyone had gathered around them, and Shino and Kiba began to inform them of everything they knew from the start of the mission to witnessing Sakura's return in the hospital. When the hospital was mentioned, Ino spoke up and asked, "Why did she have to go to the hospital? Is Sakura alright?" "I don't know, Ino-san. The extent of her injuries looked pretty severe, the brief moments that we saw her. But if you would like to wait a few minutes, I can give a more detailed account of what happened to her. And quat," Shino replied. Shino then gave a mental command to one of his insects, which immediately flew off towards the hospital to retrieve his insect brethren. While waiting, everyone was silent, as each one wondering about their classmate and friend. The silence was suddenly shattered by a mirthless laughter, and everyone turned to the source, which happened to be Naruto. After a moment, he stopped laughing and said in an angry and pain-filled voice, "So she really deserted and betrayed all of her friends, family, and the village just to be with that team. I don't know why I'm so surprised. Sasuke always came first to her over everything and everyone else. She probably didn't give one thought about how this would affect everybody around her, including me." "That's not true, Naruto. And quat," Shino says. "What do you mean?" Naruto asks. "Sakura did think of one other person, Naruto. She thought of you. I already told you about the letter she sent to the Hokage. She also left one for you as well. It was opened during the mission briefing to see if it contained any information about her whereabouts. Sadly, it did not. And quat," Shino stated. What did it say?" Naruto asked. "It said, 'I'm sorry.' And quat," Shino stoically replied. Upon hearing this, Naruto closed his eyes and dropped his head down before dejectedly saying, "Yeah, that's about the extent of Sakura's vocabulary with me. She's either calling me a baka, or apologizing to me about something." Hinata put her arms around Naruto and hugged him close to her. She absolutely hated seeing Naruto in any kind of pain, and the fact that once again it was Sakura who was causing his pain infuriated the Hyuga heir to no end. Hinata didn't think she could hate Sakura any more than she did that day in the Hokage's office, but she was wrong. At this moment she hated Sakura with every fiber of her being. Not long after this, Shino's insect spy returned and crawled inside Shino's head through his ear to deliver all the information it had learned while at the hospital. Taking a moment to process some of the information he was getting, Shino spoke up and said, "What I'm about to tell you is straight from the initial medical report on Sakura. I'm still processing much of it as I speak, but I can tell you what I know so far. Patient number 02389, Haruno Sakura, age 14, gender female, shinobi status Jinan, parents Haruno Ishii mother, Haruno Taro father." Grrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrr irritated Ino angrily said. I already told Ino-san, I can only relay the information to you all in the order I receive it. Please be patient, I will get to the extent of her injuries in a moment. Ah, here it comes right now. Everyone present leaned in a little bit, as Shino began to speak of Sakura's injuries. The patient was admitted to the hospital suffering from blunt force trauma and severe lacerations on over 50% of her body. The patient was also suffering from severe blood loss and had gone into shock before medical procedures were initiated. Once the patient was stabilized, a cursory physical examination was given to ascertain the extent of the injuries the victim was suffering from, and is as follows. Blunt force trauma to the cranium resulting in at least one major concussion, possibly more. Several fractures to the face including the left eye orbital bone, cheekbone, jawbone, and nasal cavity. Also several teeth had been dislodged due to the BFT. The patient also had deep lacerations on the left side of her face, which will require orbital craniofacial surgery, head and facial reconstruction, in the future. Contusions around the throat, consistent with strangulation. The left shoulder of the patient was dislocated as well as the left elbow. The left arm of the patient also suffered fractures to the humerus, radius, and ulna bones. Fractures were also discovered throughout the patient's ribcage, 4 fractures on the victim's right side and 3 on her left side. Numerous deep lacerations on the front of the patient's body causing severe damage to the breasts and abdominal area of the victim. A single laceration was found down the patient's back as if caused by some type of sharp implement. This differed from the lacerations on the front of the victim, as their cause was more indicative of something organic. Possibly the jagged bark of a tree, as traces were found within the wounds both in the face and chest area of the victim. Severe contusions were found in numerous amounts throughout the body. It also appears, though not confirmed as of yet, that the patient was sexu-. Shino stopped speaking at this point and became deathly silent. After a minute he finally spoke once more and informed everyone that was all the information his Kikaiku insect was able to gather. However, someone who knew him quite well recognized that this was false, and a soft voice said, "Shino-kun, was Sakura, Hinata hesitantly tried to ask the question every other kunoichi was afraid to. Shino looked to the ground a moment before quietly saying, repeatedly. All the kunoichis present visibly tensed upon hearing this, and many of them held onto the hand or arm of their respective boyfriend a little bit tighter. The moods of everyone present dropped like a stone after hearing what Shino had said. Kiba, however, did not understand why Shino had stopped talking or what he meant when he said repeatedly. He began to openly question his teammate about what he meant, but was receiving no answer from the Bugmaster. After about a minute of this, most of the people present were wishing Kiba would just shut up, but it was Tamari who finally lost her patience with him and answered his question by yelling, "She was raped, you idiot." Hearing it said out loud brought everything to a standstill, and no one would say anything as each one tried to come to grips with what they had learned. The reactions of each one of the remaining Konoha 12 was varied, as each person had different thoughts or feelings about what had happened to Sakura. Tenten felt saddened for Sakura as belied her giving nature. True, while she hardly knew the girl and of what she did know she didn't particularly care for, she wouldn't wish that fate upon her worst enemy, let alone a fellow Leaf Kunoichi. But Tenten also felt a little afraid as well, although not so much for Sakura, but rather she was afraid for herself. If Sasuke could do this to his own teammate, would the same fate be in store for her? If not worse, were they to ever meet again? Tenten also felt ashamed for caring more about herself than of Sakura's well-being, but she couldn't help it. What had happened to Sakura was the one common fear that every kunoichi in the world shared to the depths of their souls. She gripped Neiji's arm a little bit tighter, and looked to his face and wondered what thoughts were going through his mind about this. Neji felt his girlfriend grip his arm a little tighter, and he gazed upon her frightened face and attempted to smile to reassure her that she was safe. When she smiled back, he brought her head to rest upon his shoulder, while his thoughts returned to the subject at hand. He had never liked Sakura, but even she didn't deserve the fate that had befallen her. But as much as he wanted to sympathize for the girl, he found that he couldn't. The truth of the matter was that Sakura had brought this down upon herself of her own choosing. And though he did feel badly that she was hurt, he wondered if she finally realizes her utter stupidity in forsaking all others in pursuit of that Uchiha bastard. Neiji's thoughts then turned to how this event might affect the Hyuga clan. And as morbid as this act was, it could prove to be very beneficial to the clan. Sasuke's betrayal and now his committing of this heinous crime against a Leaf Village shinobi would effectively end any power the Uchiha clan had within the council. Even Danzo, the Uchiha's most diehard supporter, would not be able to save their clan seat on the council after this. So, in the vacuum of that removal, the Hyuga clan could fill the void and become the undisputed most powerful clan in Konoha. This was all contingent upon Hiashi recognizing and quickly filling that void left by the expulsion of the Uchiha clan. But for all of Hiashi's faults, politics was not one of them. In fact, on the council he was a political genius and would never let such an opportunity pass to increase the power and stature of the Hyuga clan. And all of this would come about from the actions of one idiotic lovesick fangirl of Sasuke Uchiha. The absurdity of the whole political power shift was almost comical, if its foundation hadn't been based upon such an evil act. Neiji's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a bag being crinkled, as he looked over to see Kuji closing the bag of potato chips he was eating. Kuji, to his surprise, found he wasn't hungry anymore. As he closed his bag of chips, he didn't know why he had lost his appetite. He rarely ever did. He suspected that hearing the news about Sakura had something to do with it. But this too was a mystery to him, as he didn't have any type of relationship with the girl other than she was a fellow classmate. Sakura had never treated him badly. In fact, she had treated him like most girls did and ignored him for the most part. The few times they did have to interact growing up, she had been polite and cordial with him, but there was never any type of genuine feelings between them. Which is why he was surprised he was feeling as badly as he did. Kuji could only guess that what had happened to her he wouldn't wish upon anyone, and this alone was causing his feelings of sadness, rather than any actual fondness for the girl. The only memories he had of Sakura was when she was with Naruto and she usually treated him like dirt, which never sat well with Kuji. But Naruto always stuck up for his crush or made excuses for her treatment of him. In truth, Kuji understood Naruto's crush on Sakura better than anyone else, for he too had fallen in love with his own kunoichi teammate. The only difference being that while Naruto was brave enough to express those feelings to his crush, Kuji kept his bottled away because he knew he had no hope of those feelings ever being returned by Ino. He looked over to his teammate and worried about how she was handling the news of what had happened to her former best friend. He could see that her entire body was slightly shaking, as she stared off into the distance. Kuji wanted badly to go over and hug the young kunoichi to comfort her, but he knew he could not. His relationship with Ino, much to his despair, was very similar to Naruto's with Sakura. All he would ever be to her was a teammate and nothing more. Ino was sick to her stomach over what had happened to Sakura. Confusion was running rampant in her mind as countless thoughts and emotions grappled with one another. How could this have happened? Why didn't Sakura talk to anyone before doing something as foolish as to try and bring that traitor back to the village on her own? Was she really willing to go with him if he didn't come back? The more she thought about these and other things, the angrier she got. She was enraged at Sasuke for committing such a twisted and evil act against her former friend. She prayed that she would be able to see him brought to justice and, if left up to her, killed as painfully as possible for doing this. Ino was even angrier with Sakura, for being so stupid and foolish as to continue to chase after that bastard Uchiha after everything he has done. Though she was ashamed to admit it, at one time she herself had been a rabid fangirl for Sasuke. But even she had realized his true nature, when her friends and comrades had been brought back that horrible day in the hospital months ago. Why couldn't Sakura recognize the truth about Sasuke when everyone else did? It was beyond Ino's understanding. How could one girl be so book smart yet life retarded all at the same time? But the person that Ino was angriest at most of all was herself. She hadn't been a friend to Sakura since the day her teammates were almost killed trying to retrieve her precious Sasuke-kun. Actually, that wasn't true. She and Sakura hadn't been friends for a long time before that. And even though it was Sakura who ended their friendship so long ago over that stupid scumbag Uchiha, Ino always believed that they would one day resolve their differences and resume their friendship. As Ino thought this to herself, she looked at a red sash she had pulled out of her pocket. Ino was angry with herself because if she hadn't been so vindictive with Sakura these past few months, they may have already repaired their friendship and none of this would have happened. Sasuke had hurt her friends, and since she was powerless to hurt him, hurting his number one obsessive fangirl was the next best thing. Sakura had tried many times to reach out to Ino since that day in the hospital, but to no avail. Ino always felt that Sakura never really did value their friendship. So when Sakura reached out to her, Ino refused to have anything to do with her anymore, even going so far as to tell the girl to go find her traitor team of a boyfriend and go talk to him, before slamming the door on Sakura. In a way, because of her actions towards Sakura, she had practically pushed the girl into going after him. That's when it hit Ino. The anger she was feeling towards herself was nothing more than an attempt on her part to hide from or ignore the one true emotion that was filling her mind and heart: guilt. Shikamaru glanced over to his teammate and watched her quickly wipe a tear out of her eye and shove a red sash back into her pocket. He knew Ino and Sakura had been the closest of friends growing up, and as much as Ino would pretend that it didn't bother her when their friendship ended, it did. Shikamaru recognized the significance of that sash, as it marked the day Sakura decided to willingly throw her best friend aside, all in pursuit of a boy, and that act alone had hurt Ino more than Sakura could have ever imagined. Shikamaru sighed, as once again Sakura's actions had struck a chord with his teammate, and he knew that dealing with Ino for the next few days was going to be troublesome. That troublesome aspect of Sakura is the main reason Shikamaru distanced himself from her growing up. The only thing they had in common was Sakura came the closest of his classmates to matching his academic scores while at the academy. Shikamaru had witnessed a few interactions between Sakura and his friend Naruto in the past, but those usually didn't end well, especially for Naruto, who would end up with a lump on his head. But Naruto never seemed to mind, so if he didn't, why should he? In the end, Shikamaru was sorry that Sakura had been so badly hurt by Sasuke, but was apathetic about the rest of the situation except for 2 points: politics and Naruto. Shikamaru closed his eyes and made his trademark hand sign, which always signified when he was in deep contemplation. This attack on Sakura would have deep ramifications within the Konoha Council. Danzo, who had been voting for the Uchiha's seat in their absentia, would lose that seat because of Sasuke's crimes. Once this happens, the Hyuga clan will swoop in and claim an additional council seat for themselves, which would make their clan the most powerful in the entire village. This increase of political power and prestige for the Hyugas would place them upon nearly equal ground as the Hokage. This would not bode well for Lady Tsunade in the future and would be most troublesome for Konoha in the long term, Shikamaru surmised. Now when it came to Naruto, even Shikamaru's incredible brainpower was unable to deduce what reactions his friend may experience, as one of Naruto's greatest strengths is his unpredictability. But, when it came to matter of emotions, his unpredictability is also his greatest weakness. A frustrated Shikamaru finally gave up and opened his eyes to scan for Naruto, when his vision fell upon his new girlfriend Tamari, who was staring intently at his face. He gave a slight smile and a squeeze of her hand before turning his head skywards and lying down on the grass. Tamari looked at her newly acquired boyfriend as was perplexed. He had been in deep meditative thought for several minutes before he awoke and smiled at her while squeezing her hand. She could tell he was bothered about something but didn't think it was solely about what had happened to his female classmate, though what had happened probably did play some part in it. Tamari didn't know this Sakura girl at all, and the only thing she could recall about the girl was she had been fortunate to tie Shikamaru's teammate Ino in the Chunin exam. Other than that, it was just the normal girl gossip, and the prevailing opinion of most people was Sakura was a grade A number 1 bitch. And quat, especially where Naruto was involved. This did not endear Sakura to Tamari at all, as she owed Naruto a debt of gratitude for giving her little brother back to her after he had been gone for so many years. It was a debt she felt she could never repay Naruto no matter how much she tried. So, while Tamari did feel badly about what had happened to the girl, for it was the one fearful act all Kunoichi shared, it sounded like the girl had brought it down upon herself. As far as Tamari was concerned, if that were true, she wouldn't reward stupidity with sympathy from her, only indifference. A small growl from Kiba drew Tamari's attention to her former would-be suitor. Kiba was stunned to hear the news about what Sasuke did to Sakura. Kiba always felt if you could get past Sakura's large forehead, she had a slamming little body. Sasuke, he never had liked that pampered arrogant piece of shit growing up, and now learning that asshole was capable of doing something like this, he disliked him even more now. Kiba thought Sakura was supposedly that prick's friend, and she definitely was his number one obsessed fangirl. Hell, all Sasuke had to do is ask, and Sakura probably would have given it up to him in a heartbeat. Why rape her? He just ruined the girl for no reason. Kiba couldn't even date Sakura now if he wanted to, because of his clan's laws about prospective mates being pure and not used. Kiba thought to himself. Shaking his head in disgust and growling in disappointment, Kiba looked over to his friend Shino and wondered what he thought about this whole situation. Shino had very little to say about what happened to Sakura, but Shino very rarely had much to say about anything. He was sorry that such a horrendous act had befallen the girl, as it was something no one should have to experience. However, on a personal level he felt nothing for her. The truth of the matter was he did not know Sakura at all. Shino had always stayed clear of Sakura while growing up. There was something about the frequency and pitch of her voice, which always caused him and his insects discomfort. He did know that this girl had caused his teammate Hinata great pain and heartache over Naruto throughout the years, and this did bother him. Hinata, as well as Naruto, Kiba, Kuji, and Shikamaru had been the first people outside of his clan his age to accept him as he is without judgment. Shino was unable to openly express this to his friends, but he felt a great loyalty to all of them, but especially when it came to Hinata. She had been the first girl outside of the clan who didn't shriek or run away from him because of his insects, and even though he never had any romantic feelings towards Hinata, being her teammate over the years, she had become a surrogate sister to him, which he greatly appreciated, being the sole heir of his family's clan. In the end, the only emotions Shino felt towards Sakura at that moment was apathy, and great concern for Hinata, and how she is handling all of this. Shino turned to look Hinata, and saw her standing alone with her arms wrapped around herself, shivering slightly even though it wasn't cold outside. Hinata thought her whole world was crumbling down around her, when Naruto released his embrace from her and walked a short distance away from everyone after hearing the news of what had happened to Sakura. Subconsciously, Hinata had wrapped her arms around herself, as if trying in some vain attempt to mimic the feel of his arms around her. As this was happening, her mind was flooded with numerous emotions, each one in conflict with the other, seeking dominance of her thoughts. When she first heard the news, the first emotion she felt was one of sorrow. No woman should ever have to endure something as horrific as what Sakura went through. But then that emotion was quickly replaced by one of anger. Hinata was angry that Sasuke would do something like this, and she was even angrier that Sakura had willingly put herself in a position for this to happen. Anger soon gave way to hatred, both of Sasuke and of Sakura. Hinata hated Sasuke for his betrayal of Naruto, by someone he once called a friend and a brother, and she hated Sakura even more for the pain she was causing Naruto from her own selfishness in seeking out that monster to join him in his betrayal. The two people who Naruto had once considered his most precious in life, had each stabbed him in his back without a care or forethought of what this would do to him. Hinata thought briefly that maybe she should carry out her warning she made to Sakura that day in the Hokage's office. But after hearing what Sakura has already endured the past few days, Hinata knew she wouldn't have the heart to carry out her threat, no matter how much she might want to. The last emotion that was overpowering the others that Hinata was feeling was one of fear. The fear Hinata felt wasn't of Sasuke as one might think, but rather that what he did to Sakura would drive Naruto straight into her arms or hers into his. No matter how many times Naruto had expressed his love to Hinata, deep down she always carried the terrifying notion that one day he would leave her for Sakura. Hinata has always known that Naruto at one time considered Sakura his one true love in life, and even though he had purged himself of those feelings, Hinata knew that he would always carry a remnant of that love he felt for Sakura throughout his life. This vile crime committed by Sasuke is something that could act as a catalyst for that remnant to grow into something harmful in Hinata's relationship with Naruto. Hinata found herself wishing that Sakura had never returned or even died out there by the hands of her precious Sasuke-kun. She felt horribly ashamed for thinking such thoughts, but she couldn't help it. The heart-gripping terror she felt at the prospect of losing Naruto was too overwhelming to ignore. The love Hinata felt for Naruto was so immense, if he were to leave her, she truly believed she would not survive. Hinata wiped away the tears welling in her eyes, and lifted her head to gaze at Naruto a few yards away from her. She desperately wanted to go over to him and say something, anything that would help take away the pain he was surely feeling. But Hinata found she couldn't move and had no words to say to try and comfort Naruto with. This last realization on Hinata's part hurt most of all. Because of her inability to help Naruto with his pain when he needs someone the most, Hinata felt like the failure her father always said she was. Naruto's mind and body seemed to go numb on him after hearing the news of what Sasuke did to Sakura. He had walked a short distance away from his friends, fearful they would ask him questions, which he had no answers for right now. At the moment, his brain was on overload, as it seemed 1,000 memories, thoughts, and emotions filled his head at once. So overwhelming was this, he thought he might pass out from the sheer pressure inside his head. He wanted to cry out in anguish, but found he had no voice to make a sound. All he could do with his arms folded in front of him was look to the sky with his eyes screwed shut to keep back any tears. But no matter how hard he tried, a single tear did escape and slowly rolled down his cheek. Naruto knew that his life would forever be changed after today, and what the future held for him, he couldn't even begin to imagine. Well, it seems like you've made it to the end of part 3 too, Naruto vs Sasuke, the aftermath. I hope all of you guys enjoyed, and I'm kinda in a rush so I hope all of you have a wonderful day/night, bye.